Live from WISH TV, this is News 8, your local election headquarters.
WISH TV is your local election headquarters. Thanks so much for joining us for this election night special here on WISHTV.com and on our Facebook page.
A little bit of a marathon to run here tonight. All right, tonight we'll be bringing you live reports from election night party headquarters. News 8's State House Bureau Chief David Williams. You can see there on your bottom right of your screen. He's following the Republicans live from the JW Marriott. News 8's Eric Feldman is live with the Democrats there at the Hyatt downtown. And News 8's Phil Sanchez live with our news gathering partners at WIBC.
Also tonight, we are joined by our political expert, Amanda Friesen, an associate professor of political science at IUPUI. We'll be hearing from her throughout the evening. Of course, an election night just wouldn't be complete without results. And you can find those scrolling at the bottom of your screen.
And we're following dozens of races here, and they include local county races that involve sheriffs, prosecutors, state house races, congressional races, and of course, the big Senate race between Republican Mike Braun and Democrat Joe Donnelly and Libertarian Lucy Brennan. Let's get right into the numbers right now with the race. Just very few precincts are reporting what the latest numbers show, with 3% of the precincts reporting Mike Braun with a sizable lead, 60% to 36% to Donnelly.
All right, we will be following that race very closely, but first we want to check in with Eric Feldman. He is live at the Hyatt downtown with the Democratic Watch Party. Eric, what is the vibe there tonight?
Well, people are anxiously watching to see as the polls start to come in, and more people are starting to come in as well to the Hyatt Regency. And the campaign has been here for a while. Senator Donnelly was here earlier, addressed us briefly, said he's optimistic about tonight's results, but said it could be a long night, and he's used to it. And we are joined now by Will Baskin-Gerwitz. You are the campaign communications director.
That is correct, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here tonight.
Thank you so much for taking the time. So, Senator Donnelly said he's optimistic. How do you feel?
I think we're optimistic too. I mean, I think, this is a very high-profile race. We've seen a lot of excitement on both sides. But I think at the end of the day, we're looking at where the votes are coming in. We're looking at how it compares to maps in the past and to Joe's 2012 map. And we're feeling pretty good. We've got a lot of things to be excited about tonight.
We were just talking about it just before, about the Monroe County polls being open till 7. What do you think about that? How's that going to impact you guys? Because that's typically a Democratic stronghold.
I mean, I think the fact that they're running out in Monroe ballots in Monroe County really tells you what you need to know and sort of shows you where our enthusiasm is. We've seen Democrats across the state, whether it's Monroe, whether it's Marion, whether it's Lake in the region, or Joe's hometown in St. Joseph County. We're seeing a lot of Democrats who have been fired up all year. They were fired up in early voting, and they're fired up today to re-elect Joe Donnelly and keep him in the United States Senate.
So President Trump has been here quite a bit. President Obama came as well, though. What do you think about the last two presidents coming to Indiana pretty frequently now to put their message in this race that has become so high profile?
I think it just speaks to the fact that, this is a really high profile race. This has been one of the closest races in the country because, Joe is really exciting. Joe's really happy to get out and really spread his message. And I know, we've seen a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle who've been really interested in this race. I think, we're very happy that a lot of folks are getting out and voting. I think it bodes well for us, but we also just want to make sure as many Hoosiers' voices are heard as possible. Hoosiers, if you're still in line, or if you know somebody who's still in line and you're watching this, as long as you are in line when the polls close, whether that's here in central Indy where the polls have already closed, or if you're up in Lake County, if you're up in the region where polls are still open until 7 or just closed now, you can still vote as long as you're in line. We want to make sure every single Hoosier who wants to make their voice heard has had their chance to make their voice heard today.
Now, you guys spent all day here in Marion County pretty much. I know Senator Donnelly woke up in South Bend but drove right down here. Can you talk about that strategy, spending the day, the last day, to get people out to vote here in Marion County?
I think we've seen a lot that, we have a lot of fired up Democrats here in Marion County, here in Indianapolis, who really are excited to meet Joe Donnelly, hear from Joe Donnelly, and go out to vote and re-elect Joe Donnelly. And we are going to make sure, and we have made sure, that as many of those folks who are fired up can get to the polls, can see the man they're going to vote to re-elect over the next 6 years.
Now, we've seen a lot of polling showing this is going to be one tight race, just a couple points separating them in almost every single poll. Is there anything that you guys have seen in your data, in your collection, that is maybe a county that doesn't typically swing Democrat, that you're hopeful or optimistic could be a little more blue this year?
I mean, I think the thing that's jumped out to us the most this year has really been the early vote data. we've seen a huge groundswell of voters, and what we've seen is a demographic, an early voting demographic that trends demographically towards the Democrats, which is great. We've seen a lot of turnout in Lake County and Marion County and some traditional Democratic strongholds. And what we've also seen, which is really encouraging for Hoosiers and for Democrats, is a lot of folks who never turned out, who did not make their voice heard at all in 2014. A large portion of them came out and not only voted in 2018, they early voted. They were excited to make their voice heard. Those are folks who have not traditionally been a part of the Hoosier electorate and are going to help re-elect Joe Donnelly tonight.
Now, this has been quite the campaign. A lot of negative advertising, and every year after a campaign like this, you talk about how does the country come together. How do you think that Hoosiers can come together regardless of the result after a campaign like this?
I mean, I think what we need, and I think, what I have been hearing and what we have been hearing is that a lot of Hoosiers are tired of the division, and they're looking for somebody who can bring the country together. And I think, Joe Donnelly, he's been named one of the most bipartisan senators of the last 25 years, still serving in office, has worked with President Trump, has worked to get legislation and results for Hoosiers. I think Hoosiers have shown and are going to show tonight that they understand that he's the kind of person who can help bring this state and this country together by working with both sides of the aisle to accomplish something that is not partisan but is going to help this state.
Before I let you go,
yes.
I want to let people into a little bit of insight in what your job is like. So what is your typical day like? You were telling me you're up pretty late working for Senator Donnelly. Can you give people a little insight who, they see the ads, they see Senator Donnelly all over the state. Can you give them a little insight about what it's like behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what we've really seen is we got a lot of folks, and whether it's here in Indianapolis or field organizers and volunteers across the state, we have a lot of folks who really believe in Joe and have been fired up for months, if not over a year, since last August when his re-election first got going, to make sure that Joe stays in the Senate. So, I mean, that means a lot of long hours, that means a lot of sleepless nights, that means a lot of hard work and determination, but, we work as hard as our boss does because, Joe is somebody who's never going to stop working for Hoosiers, who's never going to stop fighting for Indiana, and that's the kind of voice that we need to keep in the Senate.
Will Baskin-Gerwitz, thank you so much for taking the time. We'll continue to check in with you as the night goes on.
My pleasure.
And we're going to send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Eric, thank you.
Now from the Democrats, let's go over to the Republican side. Mike Braun with a sizable lead, but of course only 3% of the precincts right now are reporting, so we've got a long way to go tonight. But our David Williams is out live right now at the JW Marriott, where the Republican Party is having a watch party. David?
Mike and Brooke, good evening to you. Yeah, hundreds of, I should say, a little more than 100 people are here at the JW right now for the Mike Braun watch party. Joining me now is Republican Party Chairman Kyle Hupper. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you.
First, how are you feeling? The results are starting to trickle in now.
Well, let's start with how great of a day it is to be an American, to have this kind of a long line turnout, a lot of good places for Republicans across the state, but just a great day for democracy. And we feel good here in Indiana. We've delivered results and have Indiana on the right track. And I think voters have recognized that through the campaigns of Mike Braun, as well as Connie Lawson, Tara Klutz, and Kelly Mitchell. And I think they're going to come home to us tonight.
Could you talk directly to voters? There might be some across the state who are actually still in line. I know the polls closed a while ago, but talk directly to voters on their Facebook feed, on Twitter, on the app right now.
Well, I would just urge all of our voters to be patient. Your vote is going to count. Stay in line, stay the course, and we need every one of you.
This is a race that the nation is watching. We're one of the most hotly contested U.S. Senate races in the nation. What do you make of that and the fact that America is watching Indiana right now?
Well, we've felt it for the last 2 or 3 months that we really are the epicenter of this national election. Mike Braun's done a tremendous job. And then, of course, we've seen great surrogates come in, whether it's been our own Vice President Mike Pence, who's been in to stump for Mike Braun, as well as the President, Bobby Knight, Lou Holtz. We've had a great lineup of folks coming in to endorse Mike Braun and support him. But I think Hoosiers have also seen that Mike Braun is just a strong Southern Indiana Hoosier that's going to go to Washington, D.C. and fight for them and do what he says he's going to do, rather than come to Indiana and say one thing and just go out and try to become part of the Washington, D.C. problem.
And we know the President Donald Trump, he was on a nationwide blitz right before today, and he was in Indiana, I want to say 3 or 4 times. He was here yesterday.
He's been in 4 times since the primary, yep.
Yeah, he was in Fort Wayne yesterday, in Indy on Friday, campaigning really hard for Mike Braun. Speak to that and the level of, I guess you could say, rock star power that he and the Vice President have brought to Indiana.
Well, he certainly brings an extra level of enthusiasm to this race, and you could feel it in Southport, you could feel it last night in Fort Wayne. He has a way to connect with a group of voters that is very unique and that is going to, I believe, turn out and driving them out to the polls. You don't stand in the rain 3 or 4 hours to get into a rally and then not show up to vote.
I want to break away real quick and talk about the other races. There's Secretary of State Connie Lawson. We've got Auditor Tara Klutz. We've also got Treasurer Kelly Mitchell. They are also on the Republican ticket. I know they're in their respective areas watching results come in. What do you make of their campaign strategies and what they're going through tonight?
You know, I think their campaign strategy has been great. You know, the governor came out and endorsed all 3 of them early and did a joint commercial with them, which I think played very well. And then the governor spent 3 days on the bus tour with Mike Braun and the 3 statewide candidates. And we hit 29 stops, talked to thousands of Hoosier voters who then went out and spread that word across their own community. So I think they've run a very strong race. I think they're very well positioned tonight, and I think all 3 of them will be reelected.
Let's change gears now to the House races. We've got a lot of those to cover too.
Sure.
With first in House District 6, we've got Greg Pence, who is the brother of Vice President Mike Pence. Could you talk about, because he hasn't really done media interviews, but he has that name recognition that people in Indiana know. Talk about his campaign strategy, where he is tonight, and your thoughts on his bid for that seat. Sure.
I think most of our congressional districts are in their district, which is where they've been today and should be tonight to celebrate with their own constituents. He's run a very strong race. He's focused on touching voters individually around his own district. He does have a strong name ID, but he also has a tremendous track record as a businessman himself. So I think he's shown that to Hoosiers, and I fully expect him to be reelected or to be elected tonight.
For people who are watching digitally, Facebook, Twitter, on social media, thank you for watching. For them, could you explain Greg Pence and his strategy? Like you said, trying to separate himself from his brother, who is the Vice President of the U.S.
I don't know if he spent much time separating, but I think he's certainly spent plenty of time talking to voters so they knew who he was as an individual, that he stands on his own 2 feet. And he's going to be a tremendous asset to Indiana having him in the House of Representatives. He'll hit the ground running, and he'll be able to deliver results for his district and also for the entire state.
And then 2 more I wanted to wrap up really quickly. We've got Trey Hollingsworth in District 9, and we also have Susan Brooks in District 5. Talk to those 2 campaigns and where you see them heading tonight.
Again, I fully expect us to hold on to all 7 of our Republican congressional seats. Susan is a tremendous congresswoman. She has a great track record before that as a public servant and is really fighting, at the tip of the spear of the fight on opioids, doing a tremendous job with that. She connects with her constituents, is really the perfect congresswoman for that 5th district. And Trey's done a great job campaigning this cycle. He's really gotten to know his district as a first-term congressman. He's worked really hard both out in the district and also here. One thing that's interesting is from day one, he's allotted time every week to just pick up the phone and call constituents back in the district to know what's going on. I think that personal touch has set him apart in that district, and he'll be elected tonight. All
right, Kyle Hupfer, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. So we're watching these results come in as we speak. You can see them right here on WishTV.com on our app and Facebook page. We're going to talk to some more people around here and bring it back to you a little later. For now, we're live in downtown Indianapolis. I'm David Williams, Wish TV News 8.
All right, David, thanks so much. We'll check back in soon. But for now, we want to keep looking at the results as they keep rolling in. And we'll begin with Secretary of State. Right now, with U.S. Senate, with 6% of precincts reporting, Mike Braun has a lead of 59% compared to Joe Donnelly's 37% and Lucy Bretton's 4%.
And of course, 6% of the precincts, as you mentioned there, so still very early in this thing. With 6% of the precincts reporting here for the Secretary of State race, Connie Lawson, not a huge surprise right now, up 64% on Jim Harper's 33%.
All right, moving on to State Auditor. With, again, 6% of precincts reporting, Tara Klutz has 63% of the vote versus Jocelyn Whitaker with 34% and John Schlick with 3%.
And also state treasurer race going on right now with 6% of the precincts reporting. Kelly Mitchell, 66% to John Aguilera, 34%.
All right, we want to go now to our own Phil Sanchez. He is live at our news gathering partner, WIBC, with the news director there to talk about how they're gearing up to cover a very, very important midterm election. Phil, good evening.
Well, Mike, good evening to you guys. Yeah, similar to us back at Wish TV, a busy night here at WIBC, to say the least, as you guys can imagine. We walked in, they were having some pizza, like most newsrooms across the country. It's an ongoing joke, especially if you follow us on social media. Joining us now, as you mentioned, Brooke, is Chris Davis, the news director here at WIBC. Chris, good to see you, sir.
Well, likewise, Phil. First, I want to know, this or this?
Either way. Either way, you look great either way.
Just want to make sure I still retain my smart look, right?
You're very smart, so it doesn't matter. Whatever you feel more comfortable with. So kind of pull the curtain back a little for the folks at home. What's it like in the newsroom here at WIBC on a big night like this?
Oh, it's definitely very busy. Fortunately, we have some great political minds. I myself am not a political person. I serve as more of a facilitator during these things. That's why we have Eric Verman, who is our chief political correspondent and State House bureau chief, and also Abdul Hakim Shabazz, who is a political commentator, as seen on Wish TV, both of them several times now. So, yeah, it's pretty busy. We've got Eric rounds up volunteers who help make sure that the election returns that we are getting are up to date and accurate. So, you know, that we're bringing the most accurate and the most recent results to everybody who's listening.
And we'll be talking with Eric and Abdul here as the night progresses, no doubt about that. Very early in the polling and the gathering information period right now.
Yes.
Any surprises so far that you're hearing that maybe I haven't heard? I know we're not too far away from each other here physically.
No, not really any surprises. And like you said, I mean, very low numbers right now because of several polling problems that have happened around the state. Some of those being in Johnson County, Monroe County, Porter County, all having some sort of trouble. And I believe it was in Porter County that the polling time got extended.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So right now they're looking at you know, that being another little while before they can start getting results in from those places. So yeah, no surprises right now. Like you heard, the same thing that I did. Braun is up just a little bit, but that is with very low numbers.
8% at this point.
Just 8%.
Really low,
so it's not really time to call anything or get excited about anything yet, no matter which way you're looking for this thing to come out.
On a personal note, what's your day been like?
Well, my day started at about 5:30. On a day like today, I usually try to get here pretty early so that we make sure that we're getting you know, the latest and best content online as well as on the air. And I went home and took a little nap about noon, came back at 5 o'clock. So on a day like this, we try to make sure that everybody gets a chance to take a break. Not everybody does, but we try to make sure everybody's fresh for the evening. And really, it's important, you know, for us, because it's important for people who listen to WIBC. This is your story as a Hoosier.
Sure.
The people who are elected today are going to represent you in D.C. They're going to be stewards of your money. They're also, for a lot of people, a representative of a moral decline or a moral ascent, you know. So this is the Hoosier story.
I love it. The story behind the story, right? So basketball's on right now, right,
yes,
on WIBC. And then after IU, you guys come on, and what's that going to be like?
Yeah, first I want to say, you know, people are tweeting us about the basketball. And yes, for people who love basketball, it's great. For people who want to hear the election returns, not so great. So it's not anything we're going to apologize for, but we are contractually obligated to carry IU basketball up until that game and the post game are over. So after that, at 9 o'clock, you're going to hear the winners, the losers. You're going to hear their stories tonight, what's going to be next for the people who don't make it to D.C. or to the State House or into the Sheriff's Office or wherever they might be trying to be going tonight. So you're going to hear those stories basically after that. You'll hear what do people want to hear? Of course, during an election night, they want to hear who's winning. That's first and foremost.
Sure. So, Chris, you've been doing this a while. We were talking off camera, 21 years, right?
Yes.
Compare this election night to maybe years past.
Well, you know, 2008 was a big one.
Yep.
2016, huge. Both of those really, really huge. A lot of people, I think, are maybe giving this a lot of drama. Some of that may be a little undue. I don't know that for sure. That's for people to decide, because Braun is some people's guy and Donnelly is some people's guy. Obviously, that's the big race tonight, and so I don't try to say this is the biggest race of your life, or this is the biggest race compared to this or that. I try to let people decide.
Sure. Now, like a good news guy, right?
Right. It's not me. It's not me. And it aggravates me when I hear people say this is historic, because really it's not up to us news people to say what's historic. That is for history to decide.
No doubt about that. But I'm sure your cohorts will be kind of chiming in on that throughout the night, right? Chris Davis,
sure.
Thank you very much for having us. We'll see you in a little while. Thank you.
Most definitely.
All righty. Thank you for having us. That's it from here, guys. WIBC, kind of like I said at the top, giving you a little bit of an idea of what it's like in a newsroom here on election night, other than Wish TV back there.
Keeping it real out there, that's for sure. I like what he says, it's not for us to say that's historic.
It's true.
It's for that to be reported on later.
It's true.
All right, we want to toss it out to David Williams right now, who is at the JW Marriott at the Republican Watch Party, where everybody's trying to wait and see what the results will be concerning Mike Braun. And I understand you got a voter with you.
I do, yeah. There are quite a few people, actually close to 100. This is Cynthia Luster. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate that. And you were telling me you voted today, this morning. How were the lines when you voted?
The lines was nice. I was the 8th person in line. It wasn't crowded during that time when I voted.
And you were telling me you changed to Republican when President Obama first came into office back in 2008.
Yes,
Tell me why you changed from Democrat to Republican.
He didn't have the views that I have. I'm a Christian person, and the things that he just didn't have my views.
Do you feel like Mike Braun or some of the other people on the Republican ticket tonight, do you feel like they share your views?
I think so. I think Mike Braun is lining up what President Trump needs. He needs somebody that's going to have his back, look out for our economy, help him get the votes in for others to make our country better, like the infrastructure. He also talked about tax break for the middle class now, and I think that's a good thing.
One other things about Mike Braun that you've heard on the campaign trail, because you've probably heard a lot. What have you heard from Mike Braun that resonates with you to be here tonight?
I like what he talked about now. He's talking about the short term for people that be in office now. And I kind of agree with that, because now it looks like to me people be in office a long time. They're not doing the things that people need to be done, and it get kind of stale with them now. So we need to change, and I think after 2 or 3 years they need to go. And some new, fresh faces need to be in there.
You're probably keeping a very close eye as these results are coming in. This is a very tight race that really the nation is watching, Indiana's U.S. Senate race. How do you feel Mike Braun and Joe Donnelly will do in tonight's election results?
Well, the polls say now he's 69%, so he's doing quite well, and I think he's going to win.
What do you think Mike Braun has done to edge him out over Joe Donnelly in this really, really tough race?
I think it's not only Mike Braun. I think it's the people who standing behind him and our president, Donald Trump, and Vice President Pence. I think we are all going to stand behind them. We like the way they're doing, fathers our country, trying to make things great, immigration and, things of that nature, and the people is behind them.
Do you feel like because President Trump was here, or in Indiana, I should say, on yesterday, he was also in Indianapolis on Friday, campaigning very hard for Mike Braun as well as the other Republican candidates. Do you feel like the president's blitz across the nation, including our state, to galvanize voters like yourself, is that working?
Yes, it is working. And the thing that would happen to Kavanaugh, the judge that the president put in there, I think that was just a terrible thing that happened to him. And a lot of us Republicans didn't like that. So we're showing it at the polls, how we felt about that.
Okay. Ms. Cynthia Luster, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate that. So we're going to find some more people who are at this watch party to talk to and bring them to you live right here on WISHTV.com. For now, we're live in downtown Indianapolis. I'm David Williams, WISH TV News 8.
All right, David, thank you. And the results continue to come in here very slowly, and it might be a late night here as well because this race predicted to be very close.
We're starting to learn, that there have been, we know there have been issues at polling centers really across Indiana, and now absentee ballots are being counted. There are 83,000 of those, so yes, very likely to be a long night. Hey, we want to go over to News 8 to Eric Feldman. He is live at the Hyatt Regency downtown for the Democratic Watch Party. Good evening to you, Eric.
Hey, Brooke, people are continuing to file in here and continuing to watch the results, not only for Joe Donnelly, but for races across the state. And we're joined now by Derek Kemp. You are a candidate for District 31 on the Democratic side. So tell me about what you're hoping for tonight, what you're looking at.
We're looking at keeping the margins down in Hamilton County and then just racking up the score in Marion. We've knocked on 20,000 doors this year, and we put in a lot of work, and so we're leaving it all out in the field.
Talk about why you wanted to run for office.
I felt there was a lack of young people here in the state. In our state Senate, there's no one in the millennial generation, and I think that's something that we need, especially if we want to continue to have young people stay here after graduating from all the great universities we have in the state.
We've been talking about with everyone the incredible turnout that we've seen, not only here in Indiana, but across the entire country. What do you make of that?
I think it's people that are finally getting engaged in their country and in their state and actually wanting to make sure that they have a voice. I saw precincts that were hitting over 50% and even over 70% in this district today, and it is incredibly exciting to see that, and hopefully it goes our way.
What do you think it means overall, though? Is this a good step for our country, no matter what, with all the number of people who are voting, all the new voters?
Yes. It's terrific. The new voters especially. I've been extremely happy to see all the young people in my district start getting involved and voting. And the fact that we are looking at not being dead last in the country for a midterm vote this year is just fantastic.
Now, you represent, you said, parts of Marion County. Something new this year was the early voting satellite sites. What sort of impact do you think that played in terms of getting more people out to vote, especially here in Marion County?
It was huge. We were able to get over 10,000 people to go vote at the Lawrence satellite location alone. And every precinct that we knocked around it, we saw an increase in voters that were actually going to vote early. And it was exactly what we wanted to see.
Now, there's been a lot of focus on the Senate race here for Senator Donnelly. What sort of impact do you think there could be with all the people, all the attention that has been given to that on the state races, where there are a lot of people running, it might not have as much attention, but just as much of an impact with more people heading to the polls?
It's been super beneficial. It's gotten more people engaged in the district, and it's certainly helped create that energy and that excitement that we maybe usually miss in midterms and definitely missed in the last one.
Derek, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time. Good luck, and we'll check in later tonight.
Have a good night.
So as we were talking about earlier, if you've been watching on this stream, we talked with Will Baskin-Gerwitz. He is the communications director for Senator Donnelly's campaign, and he talked about how he's optimistic for the night's results. They have been campaigning all day here in Marion County. They started in South Bend, where Senator Donnelly woke up, but drove immediately down to Marion County, and he has been campaigning here all day. He was here earlier, addressed the media briefly, where he said he is optimistic about tonight's results. But he is now with his family. They are watching the results come in private. In the meantime, you have a full crowd here. And if you follow my Twitter, you'd see an enormous slew of cameras. I would say 20 to 25 cameras here from all over the state, even some national outlets here too, because of the possible implications for this U.S. Senate race. Right now, to give you that quick recap, as you guys have been talking about, 51 to 49 is the layout right now. 51 Republicans, 49 Democrats is the makeup for the U.S. Senate. So any switch in party could have enormous implications to either strengthen a Republican stronghold on the U.S. Senate or possibly getting closer to a Democratic majority for the last 2 years of the Trump first term of his presidency. So that'll be something we're going to continue to watch as the night unfolds, as the poll numbers come in. But, we'll continue to see what people have to say around here. We talked with one volunteer just a few minutes ago who talked about how he's not even from Indiana. He moved here 4 months ago from D.C. He works at Lilly now, and he said that he canvassed 3 to 4 times just because he wanted to get involved in this race. He said he was really impressed with what Senator Donnelly had to say, what he thought he could continue offering for the U.S. Senate, and that is why he was campaigning. Even though not really from Indiana, he said it was a welcoming to the Hoosier state. So we'll continue to go around, try and speak with some people, candidates, also volunteers, and bring that for you live here at the Hyatt Regency. But for now, I'm going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Eric, thank you very much. And we're also keeping an eye on the national races as well. He talks about balance of power, of course, in the Senate. And we know one independent will be back, and then is Bernie Sanders of Vermont. According to the AP, he has been reelected to the Senate tonight. All
right. We want to go now to our David Williams. He is live at the JW Marriott downtown. He has been hanging with the GOP watch party. And David, you have an update for us from that location.
I do. I am with several people who are at this watch party. I'd say more than 100 people, actually. Voters are here. They are turning out. Joining me now is Katie Mack. She actually voted for the very first time today. Thank you for being with us. When you were in there in the ballot area casting your vote for the first time, how did it feel?
Just like it was important, you know, it's really important to turn out today and do this, you know.
And you are a millennial Republican. Yep. There are quite a few polls out. There's a recent Harvard University poll that said millennials like yourself were surging to the polls, early voting and today. What do you make of that? What did you see in line in terms of your generation voting?
It just needs to be shown that it's important and that we really do care, you know, and just to take a stand for really important things, you know. A lot of people feel like millennials may not care as much, but I feel that we do and that we need to share our voice, you know.
For you, what issues, say your top 3 or 4, are incredibly important to you as a millennial voter?
I'd say abortion is really high for me. That's why I'm here supporting Mike Braun, and taxes and also helping Hoosier jobs are all very important to me.
Could you dive in a little deeper and explain why those 3 topics are so important to you?
Faith is a huge thing about it, you know. It's what I believe. It's been ingrained in me, so it's just always a really important thing. So I'm just here to stand up for my faith and what I believe, and I believe that coming out and voting is the best way to do that.
You know, you've probably seen the campaign ads for months on end across home. When you think about, you know, the U.S. Senate race against Mike Braun and Joe Donnelly, that the nation is watching, what do you make of the campaign strategies that were successful to get you to vote for whoever you did?
You know, sometimes it's hard to tell what to believe, you know, as far as what's being sent out and stuff. So a lot of it was my own investigating, you know, like looking up what's true, what's not, and coming to my own real conclusions about what I want to support, you know. So, yeah.
Was that something you decided to do or something you felt like you had to do because there is this preponderance of, as the president says, is fake news? You know, you hear those things going around Facebook, Twitter. Facebook has up their settings to kind of catch fake news. Is that some of the reasons why you did that?
I just feel like it's my responsibility to be as informed as I can be, to not just believe anything I'm told, whether it's fake or not, just to try to find out myself and be informed as I can.
Between the 2 candidates, Joe Donnelly and Mike Braun, what is it about Mike Braun that drew you to him as a millennial voter as opposed to Joe Donnelly, who's a Democrat?
Well, I'm pretty much straight Republican, but so of course that would be a main draw. But again, just my beliefs and what he stands for. I believe in pretty much everything that he stands for, so it's just really important to me.
Katie Mack, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate that. So we're going to find some more folks to talk to at this watch party for Mike Braun. We are continuing to watch these election results come in. Earlier we heard from the state GOP party chairman, Kyle Hupfer, who says they are confident as they are watching these election results come in. So we'll keep you up to date right here on WISHTV.com. We're live in downtown Indianapolis. I'm David Williams, Wish TV, News 8.
All right, David, thanks so much. We have crews across central Indiana tonight bringing us the latest results and analysis. We want to go back to Eric Feldman. He is at the Democratic Watch Party at the Hyatt Regency downtown with the latest from there. Eric.
Hey, Brooke, I was telling you earlier about how there are a lot of people here who are not only candidates, but organizers, people who were trying to get as many people out to vote or even registered to vote. And we've got one of those people here with us now, Tony Davis. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing this election cycle.
Well, this election cycle, we started to get people registered to vote. Those that were purged off of the voters register list, we were out making sure those people that were purged off had the opportunity to register and to make sure that their voices were heard. That was one aspect, as well as we worked today to get our senior living centers, our residents at the senior living centers out to the polls, as well as we did major phone banking and just worked as a hub to help create community, a sense of urgency and a sense of necessity to get out to vote.
Before we continue, I just want to say that the loud cheer that you hear right now and that you've been hearing, that is because there are some positive poll results for Senator Donnelly that have been appearing on one of the TV screens. So if you hear a loud cheer, that's what it has been in the last, 20, 30 seconds or so. So you said you helped register 200,000 people around the state.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was a community effort. I reached out to community to help assist with this. Community jumped on board, and that's what organizing really is about, is bringing community together to make them feel that they have power, that what they do matters. So that's what I try to create within community.
So you've talked with a lot of these people who've now registered, possible first-time voters. What has kept them from voting in the past, from what you've heard?
I think it's more of a personalized issues with people, what they're hearing going on. People are actually personalizing this. They're taking it to heart. And they're saying, we can't allow this to keep continually going on. So they're saying, we need to do something. So the best thing that we advise them, and that they've even recognized, is that let's start with our vote.
Now, out of those 200,000 people that you helped register to vote, how many of them do you actually think made it out to vote, either today or as early voting opened up?
Well, I'm going to be the optimistic and hope that it is exactly that number and beyond.
Absolutely. So is there any story that really stands out? Someone who, had an inspiring story about how they maybe weren't registered to vote, but your group helped get them there, and is there anything that sticks out to you?
Absolutely. There was a post earlier today about when our group went out to the senior living center, and an elderly woman looked out the window and wondered what this caravan was that pulled up to the senior living center to take them to vote. And she literally teared up and gave the women that came and helped pick them up and take them to the polls a big hug and just thanked them. And I think that's really what's touched my heart, is to see that people in senior living centers as well, who are often forgotten, thought that someone recognized that they were human beings and that they thought enough of them to say that their vote matters as well.
And we've heard the push about getting college-age students, millennials, out to vote for the first time, but your organization also focusing on the senior-age people who are in some facilities, getting them out to vote for the first time.
Absolutely. And we did work all areas. We worked with our youth, but I just seen that void with the senior citizens that are out here. And I said, let's make an effort to help them out in this process.
What do you think is going to happen tonight? What's your prediction if you had a crystal ball?
I have it right here on my chest. It's the emoji of the wave sign, and it's in blue. So let's hope for the blue wave.
I haven't seen that one yet. Seen a lot of different shirts here for the different candidates, but not a blue wave. That is a literal blue wave.
That's right.
Tony, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. You hear a lot about the nastiness about this campaign, about some of the campaigns around the country, but having people like Tony helping people regardless of who they voted for, getting out to vote, 200,000 people, I must stress that, 200,000 people across the state of Indiana, an incredible accomplishment. Tony, thank you so much for taking the time. We're going to send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Eric, thank you so much. We were sitting here chatting with, might as well just bring her in now, Amanda Friesen with IUPUI, a political science professor. You've been following this race closely, especially the Senate race. It's obviously the number one talker really around here. How do you see this thing playing out with so many people coming out and, casting their vote?
Yeah, all eyes are on Indiana for this particular race, and it's probably our most exciting race that's going to be for us to watch. It's hard to say. Of course, Braun is in the lead right now, and we're waiting. Porter County is going to be open till 9:30. There's absentee ballots to be counted. It's going to be really tight, and again, it's going to be back to that turnout. So, are people going to be energized by the 2016 election and more Democrats or undecideds turn out in Indiana and support Senator Donnelly, or will a Republican take the Senate seat again in a very reliably Republican state?
And we look at the race right now. I can't see exactly. 16% of precincts reporting. Mike Braun still with that pretty sizable lead, 57% to 40%. And one thing you were talking about, the absentee ballots, you said 83 absentee voters this year. Was it 83,000?
83,000 was the number we were hearing that would be yet to be counted. And so, in a lot of, when we're hearing with Bernie Sanders and Tim Kaine, and they're calling the race because it's pretty clear that that's going to be, people are going to be staying up late to see what happens with Indiana.
All right, let's kind of simplify the terms here. We talk about this being such an important race on the national level. Why is this important? Obviously, it's a very tight control, really power control here in Congress. What does it mean if Democrats would take over control, if Republicans would keep control? For those who are watching and just may not have a total grasp on this as far as national politics go, what are the implications here?
Right. So we're facing a situation that the House is likely going to go to the Democrats. So they're going to pick up a number of seats today. And, if predictions hold true, they are going to take control of the House. And probably Republicans will stay in control of the Senate. So you have a divided government situation that is going to lead to some challenges in lawmaking going forward. But some people would say, oh, this is good because we have a Republican in the presidency or in the Oval Office. If we have some, another party controlling one of the chambers, that there can be some extra sort of checks on power, that there can be some the separation of powers that most people hope happens in Washington, et cetera. So you're going to see probably a bit more gridlock going forward, and it'll be interesting to see how this sets up 2020.
Yeah, well, we talked about that, and we talked about the delays in voting here in central Indiana and across the country. There have been issues across the country, people waiting hours and hours in line to vote, and Amanda made an interesting point that we may not see the effects of that today, but next election, people might remember that. I waited 3 hours in line to vote. I don't think I'm going to go out next year.
Yeah, and we even look, Monroe County polling places got to stay open an hour longer than planned after they noticed some unprecedented voting. So these long lines. Do you think that would turn people away? If I was standing back there, not wanting to vote, you see a 3-hour wait, you're like, I'm just going to head home.
Yeah, particularly for people who don't have the luxury of, time off from work, or if they, yeah, exactly. If they have to pick up a loved one or have other obligations, they could be discouraged from staying in line. And there's some evidence from political science research that if people experienced, every additional hour that they experienced waiting, they're a little bit less likely maybe to vote the next time around. But the study that I'm thinking of was done in 2012 and 2014. So people don't tend to vote in midterms anyway. Yeah. So, the 2020 presidential election might not have those same effects if people waited around this time. What I think will happen is you're going to see more and more people early voting.
Okay. We have much more to discuss with Amanda Friesen coming up, but right now we want to go to our Washington Bureau correspondent, Jessica Smith, who is live in Washington tonight with the latest from the landscape there. Jessica, what are you watching for tonight?
Hey, Brooke, we are watching the Indiana Senate race. That is one that everyone across the country, especially here in Washington, is keeping an eye on. Can Senator Joe Donnelly defend his seat in a state that President Trump won by double digits back in 2016? You guys know the early numbers are coming in. He's trailing right now, but it can happen, right? Anything can happen at this point. And we've seen the national party leaders really pour a lot of resources into Indiana. They want to win this race because Republicans have just a slim majority in the Senate. And if they can pick up that extra seat, that'll make a big difference for them. But Donnelly is putting up a fight. We'll be watching really closely to see what happens there tonight.
Yeah, Jessica, what's the mood like in Washington? You know, President Trump and even the Vice President were out here multiple times to campaign for Mike Braun. How do people feel? Do they think there's going to be a shift in power here with the Democrats?
You know, the sense here in Washington is that Democratic lawmakers might take back the House, but Republicans are feeling pretty confident about the Senate. We'll see how this shakes out, but they really do think that Democratic lawmakers, at least the polling suggests right now, will take back the House, and we're going to have a divided Congress. But it is so early. As we learned in 2016, anything can happen. So there's still a lot of results to come in, and we'll be watching them.
Senator Donnelly has had a tough re-election bid, you could say, Jessica, and talking about his strategy, and as a Democrat up for re-election in a very red state, just talk about this race in general. We're not used to, as Hoosiers, being in the national spotlight, and here we are.
Right, and Senator Donnelly has really had to walk this tightrope to maintain his Democratic base, the people who voted him in, and then try to get some moderate Republicans on board as well. So what his message has been is, I'm going to work with President Trump when I can, but I'm also going to stand up to him when I need to. And we've seen him work with the president on a lot of things, really. We've looked at opioids, his right to try law. We've defended the president on the border wall. So there's been a lot of things that he's worked with Republicans on. He voted for President Trump's first Supreme Court pick, but then he has been willing to stand up to the president as well. He voted no on tax cuts, no on Brett Kavanaugh. He has been very critical of the president and the Republican efforts to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. So he has really just been trying to, as he says, do what's right for Indiana and kind of move beyond the party politics. And that's been that tightrope that he's been walking, trying to get voters on both sides of the aisle.
What has the president been saying today? You are live for us in Washington, D.C., and have quite the pulse there. What has the president, even vice president, what's the talk been today?
You know, the president has been kind of behind the scenes today. He hasn't really been in the public eye. He had 3 different campaign stops yesterday. Today, he is watching the results. We just heard from Sarah Sanders with family and friends in the White House. But he has been tweeting some about certain Republican candidates, encouraging Republican voters to get out to the polls. He hasn't mentioned Indiana quite yet that I've seen, but he has just been encouraging Republican voters to get out and vote for his candidates, because he really sees this as he put it on the campaign trail, a vote for this Republican candidate is a vote for me. So he is trying to tell voters to get out and vote for these Republicans, because in turn they are voting for President Trump.
Jessica, what does it mean if Democrats take the House?
It's going to be harder for President Trump and Republicans to get things done. For his first almost 2 years in office, President Trump has had a Republican-controlled Senate and House. So if Democrats do take the House, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. The tax cuts 2.0 probably won't happen. Repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, probably not possible with the Democratic House. But 2 areas that I've heard both Republican and Democratic lawmakers say they want to work together on, this infrastructure and lowering the price of prescription drugs. So even if we do have a divided Congress, there's a chance they could work together on those 2 issues, because it seems like Republicans and Democrats do agree those are important things they need to work on. But we could see more gridlock on other issues, especially just President Trump's agenda if he does have a divided Congress.
All right, Jessica Smith, live for us tonight in Washington, D.C. We'll check back in with you soon. Thanks, Jessica.
All right, we do have a CNN now is calling one of the races here in Indiana for District 6 for the U.S. representative. And right now, if we can pull that graphic up for you, it is going, they're calling it for Greg Pence with just 31% of precincts reporting, though, but pretty sizable lead right now, 62% to 35% over Jeanine Lake. So Greg Pence, the projected winner there in District 6, according to CNN.
All right, our first projected winner of the night, I believe, but we have more numbers rolling in. Let's take a look at what else we have. I believe we have Secretary of State results coming in, and we'll be looking at these as we go. They're also scrolling across the bottom of your screen at any time, also on wishtv.com. Connie Lawson, 62% of the vote. This is with 18% of precincts reporting. Jim Harper, 35%. Mark Rutherford, Libertarian, there with just 3%. We also have
State Auditor. I think we could.
State Auditor.
Right. We can look at that. And right now, another Republican in the lead there, a sizable lead with 20% of precincts reporting. Tara Klutz with 61% over Jocelyn Whitaker with 35%.
All right. Amanda Friesen, professor of political science at IUPUI, is joining us all night to talk about this and break this down. Greg Pence, obviously name recognition, probably not a surprise.
Right. It would be very surprising if any Democrats picked up some of these seats in districts that are reliably Republican. You don't tend to see that flip from year to year, and certainly interesting that Greg is taking over in the district that Mike was once in, and doesn't have a lot of political experience, but maybe we'll begin to build from there.
Let's talk about one thing that you mentioned a little bit earlier, just the amount of women that are running for office across the state. It's typically Indiana does not do very well in that department. I think you said it was 36 out of 50 states usually, and the amount of women that run for office here.
Yeah, so typically the amount of women who are in state legislatures across the country are anywhere from 20 to 25%, depending on if you're looking at the House or the Senate in each of those states. And among the states, Indiana is ranked 36. So we have fewer women in our General Assembly than other states. But in 2016 and this year, we saw a sharp uptick in the number of women who were running for state legislative offices. And we're seeing this on the Democratic side. If you look over the past 20 years, the number of Republican women who've been running for office has stayed pretty steady. 10 to 15 people per election year, and they tend to win. When they run, they're probably running in...
When they run as a Republican.
Yeah, reliably Republican districts. And certainly we have some Democratic legislative or women in our legislature, et cetera. But what you're seeing this year is an increase in these Democratic women, and this is reflective of a widespread trend across the United States. So certainly 2016 galvanized a response on the Democratic side. So you almost always see a surge of interest and participation from the opposite party after one party wins the presidency. But because of the rhetoric during the 2016 election, because of Hillary Clinton being the first female candidate to be on the national stage, perhaps we saw a bit more of that response. So the Women's March, the March for Science, all these different kinds of marches that found people who've never protested before, who've never gone to, who haven't been politically involved, started to get involved. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So that some of that could be due to just renewed political interest, people being able to understand how the political process works, maybe find that they want to get involved, and so on.
Doesn't surprise me, with the it's kind of black and white with the way that people view Trump. So either these rallies, I have to say, the one thing that I've noticed with President Trump's rallies, just the amount of people that are out at these things is truly incredible, especially in Indiana. I mean, they're filling up the arena. I know in Fort Wayne and in Gary and down in Evansville. It's remarkable the amount, the turnout here. But I guess it shouldn't be. I mean, as Indiana tends to vote red, so.
Well, I mean, former President Obama was in Gary, and also tickets sold out for his, kind of stumping for Senator Donnelly. So, if he would have held that in a different area of the state, maybe a little bit less so, yeah.
All right, Amanda Friesen, America
Friesen.
Yeah, going to give you a new name. Thanks so much. We'll check back in. We want to go now to Eric Feldman. He is live at the Hyatt Regency downtown for the Democratic Watch Party with a member of the deaf community. Is that right, Eric?
Yeah, hey, Brooke. It's a very interesting story that we're going to share with you. We're joined by two people right now, Bonita Iwan, who is deaf, lives here in Indianapolis, and Diane Jones, who is her sign language interpreter. They're both with us now, and you were telling me, Bonita, something very interesting about how it's tough to get the deaf community out mobilized to vote. Can you talk about and share with our viewers what you were telling me?
The deaf community, growing up in a public school or not having communication at home, they don't understand the election process or the importance of voting. So being an advocate, I can make a difference in talking about why their vote counts, why their voice counts.
And what strides do you feel you made this year? we've seen high turnout. Did you feel like there was also higher turnout in the deaf community?
Since the most recent election, people are more comfortable. They know what to look for. They know how to identify what candidates they want to support. So there's more clarity now within the deaf community because of our advocacy work.
So can you talk a little bit more about that advocacy work, the work you do to try and get more people out to vote?
Well, I do a lot of sign language blogs on Facebook. I go out there, I'm face-to-face explaining things to people, and now more deaf people are coming to me and asking me, what do I do, where do I go? And I refer them to indianavoters.com. So I'm doing it in person, face-to-face, Facebook, blogs. I think I'm really the voice for the deaf community when it comes to elections.
Wow. What, if you had to estimate, what percentage of the deaf community are coming out to vote in elections?
I would have absolutely no idea. But the people that I have contacted personally, I know personally that because of their confidence, their understanding, they did vote.
Are there any steps you believe the state should be taking to make that process easier, or should be at least looking at?
I think that the state needs to include the deaf community, particularly when it comes to debates around the state. Deaf people need to be able to contact their leaders and get information. Also, I think the deaf community needs a role. They need to be participating and have specific roles in all of the campaign processes.
Bonita, what was the most important issue to you this election season?
I would have to say employment. 75% of deaf people are underemployed, and a lot of these people have a degree. They're capable of working, but companies sometimes are resistant because they think it's a communication issue, but it really isn't, because we have so much technology now. So people just need to understand that deaf people are capable and keep an open mind.
And you said you're out here, you were supporting a couple candidates, right? Can you tell me about who you're out here supporting?
Yes, Dee Thornton.
Who's running against Susan Brooks, right?
Please welcome to the stage your state Democratic Party Chairman, John Zodi.
Keep going.
We're Chairman Zodi from the Democratic Party is about to speak. We will get to that in a second, but thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Sure. Come talk to me anytime. Thank you.
We're going to send it back.
All right, Eric, thanks so much. Democratic State Chairman.
And thank all of you.
Yes, let's listen in.
We're out knocking doors and talking to every last person we could before the polls closed. And so we've just had polls close in, of course, the Central Time Zone just for about an hour. So we've still got a lot of information we're waiting on, but certainly all of you should do what you can to relax a little bit and have a drink, have some chips, and relish your good work that you've done this year in this election cycle. So let's prepare for a long night, possibly. We'll be back in touch. People will be up here off and on, but just want to welcome you. Thank you for what you have done for our Democratic candidates who are out there fighting for livable wages, protecting public education, access to health care, getting rid of gerrymandering, and making sure people in this state are safe, secure, and protected equally under law. That's what we're about in the Indiana Democratic Party. So thank you for your help. Stay tuned and buckle up. So thanks a lot.
Democratic State Chairman John Zodi there. We have crews at both watch parties. Yeah. That was the Democratic watch party.
Kind of neat thing is you don't get to see that a lot of times. You know, by the time the newscast comes around, you're either seeing the candidates either accept or accept defeat as well. We want to talk to David Williams. He's out at the Republican watch party at the JW Marriott. How you doing, David?
Doing pretty well. Hope you guys are doing well too, and all of you watching online and our different social media platforms. It is just past 8 p.m. and the polls have closed in more than a dozen states across the nation. And we are here with a couple more Republicans who are at this watch party. I want to introduce you to Cole Asbury and Dallas Garland. Thank you both for being with us. So, what was it about the Republican Party that drew you to them as millennials?
Mainly their economic platform, like tax cuts and stuff like that.
And Dallas, what was it for you?
It was more, they really leaned toward my ideals. Yeah, I like the economy and many of the human rights stuff. I definitely believe in some of it, yeah.
Cole, with you, what issues resonate with you during this election cycle that you feel like Mike Braun or any of the other Republican candidates closely align with how you feel?
Like I said, mainly economics, because like I'm more of a free market oriented guy, so like low taxes and less regulation is like what I would vote for.
And Dallas, what would you say are some of your hot topics that closely align with you that you feel Republicans have checked the boxes on?
I couldn't hear the question. Sorry.
What do you feel like are some of your topics that Republicans closely align with you?
I believe in mostly abortion and the immigration policies. Most of them I'm pretty in line with in that ideals, but I definitely do agree with free market and all that stuff too.
So you both are watching these results come in. They're coming in right this second as we speak. You're watching them from across the state. The nation is watching our state. What do you make of these election results that are coming in second by second? Cole, I'll start with you.
It's kind of like nerve-wracking because like it'll change percentage from one showing to the next. So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of making me eager and nervous a little bit, but like it's fun to watch regardless. So yeah.
And for you, Dallas, how are you feeling watching these election results come in by the second?
I definitely came in here thinking it was going to be a 50-50 race. But when I saw the first round of votes come in, I was really surprised by the numbers leaning towards Republican. I thought it was going to be a really close race today. And
quickly for both of you, I know this is a tight race, but give me your personal projections of how you think the night will turn out.
Like Dallas said, I think it's going to be 50-50 for sure, like really close. Like I think if either candidate wins, it's going to be within like less than a 5% margin.
I think that too, but I'm definitely leaning towards Republican keeping the seat here.
Dallas Garland and Cole Asbury, thank you both for joining us. I appreciate it. You're hearing from supporters who are at this rally. We can continue to hear it all night. This is a very close race, even among people who are here at this watch party, closely watching these results that are trickling in, keeping a close eye on who will win the tickets and the votes across the entire state. So we're watching these and we'll bring them to you, of course, as we get them. We are live in downtown Indianapolis. I'm David Williams, Wish TV, News 8.
David, thank you. Hey, we are ready to call one of the races we've been following. Sheriff for Howard County right now. And Jerry Asher, with 100% of the precincts reporting, wins this race over Norris Jones, a Democrat.
And on a national landscape, we are starting to get some races being called as well. CNN projecting Elizabeth Warren as the winner in Massachusetts for her Senate seat. Also, Democrats will keep Senate seats in Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts, Ohio, and Rhode Island. So a lot of new information starting to come in. And one of the most interesting points that we've seen so far were exit poll information, specifically with Indiana voters and their top issue that they were concerned about in this election, health care.
Interesting, right? And health care and President Trump's policies were important issues among Indiana residents in the midterm. This is that survey, those exit polls. Let's see what else here. They were split on whether the country's on the right track. Let's bring in Amanda Freeman from IUPUI, professor of political science. That was one of the questions we were chatting about earlier. It's kind of a weird question to ask because it's not very specific.
Right. So is the country on the right track or on the wrong track? As you may imagine, correlates pretty closely with whether your preferred party is in power or not, right? So, of course, if they aren't, or there's a perception that, you're preferences aren't being enacted, you would say that it's the wrong track, and then if that were to change. So, and then of course, because people have, they might have a Democratic state legislative representative or a Democratic senator, but then like a Republican president. So who are they thinking about when they answer that question, right? So it's.
Does it surprise you that health care was the #1 concern?
It continues to pop up. So when you ask people, their main concerns, people have a concern for a number of issues, gun control, education, abortion, et cetera. But healthcare and jobs seem to always crop up to the top because that is the most widespread and affects most people's lives.
Yeah, I've seen a few things, immigration, obviously, with this caravan that's apparently making its way through South America, a major concern for voters. I mean, for the most part, I would say probably more in the South than a lot of Indiana voters.
Well, and that's what's interesting is if you ask, across the state or across the United States, if you ask people, sort of their opinions about immigration or concerns about the people who might be seeking refuge in the U.S. or asylum here, it doesn't necessarily correlate with whether they're in border states or not. People seem to have opinions about immigration, regardless of whether those immigrants might be in their communities or not. So definitely a wedge issue for Americans.
A lot of talk about the national landscape of politics, but we don't want to neglect the State House here in Indiana, and there are some races going on here. I think we have a graphic of the makeup of the State House currently, if I'm correct. As we get that pulled up, just talk about what is the makeup currently and what's at stake.
So, there we go.
So, there we go. Okay.
Well, so those are U.S. House and Senate. Okay,
there we go.
Perfect. I will say, as a political science professor who writes a lot of letters of recommendation for internships, the number of internships and positions available for Republican versus Democrat positions differs, right?
Yeah,
so, yeah. So we do not have a lot of Democrats in the General Assembly. Definitely dominated by Republicans. So it's, perhaps a little bit more lopsided than other states, but the majority of state legislatures are controlled by Republicans at this time, as are about 2/3 of governor's offices. So definitely, and with Republicans currently, tomorrow will be different, or in January. Currently in control of all 3 branches of the national government, definitely this is a Republican-controlled United States in a lot of ways.
And why is that? I mean, there seems to be a difference there with the local level and state level versus the national landscape.
So
that's a tough question.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are political scientists who spend their careers trying to answer that. There's a lot of different reasons, and some of it is idiosyncratic, dependent on the state. For one of the reasons is turnout. So people who tend to vote Democrat tend to be younger, tend to be people of color, tend to be people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and so on. And those are also people that don't tend to vote as much. Whereas Republican voters tend to be older, tend to be white, tend to be wealthier, and they turn out more regularly. So that can be part of the reason. So people know less about their state and local representatives or those races than they do the national stage, even though you could argue that state and local is where our lives are affected the most.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Tell you what, they're turning out today, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
We've seen the long lines, and just see if some of these districts where these polling places where there's lines wrapped around. You waited 3 hours, right, to vote? Was that?
No, I voted early. I was in and out.
Saturday. Who waited 3 hours? Maybe that was Marcus. Marcus, you were an hour and a half, right?
I was about an hour and 45 minutes, but there were people behind me. I was in Johnson County that waited up to 3 hours because of some of those computer issues that we reported on. Yeah.
Incredible. Hey, we want to toss it out to Phil Sanchez. He's at our news gathering partner, WIBC, and he's out WBIC. WIBC. Why am I? You know what? I've been sitting here
a long night.
For quite a while.
It's only 8 o'clock, Mike.
WIBC.
You've got to keep going.
Yes,
It's only 8.
Yes, this is our partner. Hey, Phil.
It's a long night. The night is still early, though, guys. Yeah, good evening to you guys. As you mentioned, we're at WIBC, and Abdul is here with us. Abdul, you've been a busy man all day long, haven't you, sir?
Yeah, that's why I had to put up my suit and tie, hang it up, and get comfortable, because it's going to potentially be a long night. So.
Right. So to that point, what's it looking like so far?
Right now, Mike Braun is doing very well, but Mike Braun is also doing well in places that Mike Braun should do well here in Indiana. We've yet to hear from places like Lake County. Marion County is still coming in. We've got Monroe County, where Bloomington, where they kept the polls open for an extra hour. So there's still a lot of stuff out there, so the race could potentially change. One thing I have noticed is here in Marion County, Mike Delph, the state senator, northwest side of town, it looks like we have is sort of running behind J.D. Ford, so the numbers when they come in from Boone and Hamilton can be really important in that particular race. And actually, and locally, the IPS referendum is doing very well in Marion County, sort of 2-1. There have been some question as to whether the voters would come, to the aid of assistance of IPS. So it looks like that's doing well right now as well, also.
Okay, so take me back about a week ago, that debate that went down between Braun and Donnelly. Do you think that's having any impact tonight?
I don't think necessarily. The only way it would have moved the needle is somebody made a major mistake or a major gaffe, and since that didn't happen, I don't think the needle moved all that much. A lot of this boils down to ground game. I've spoken to Republicans and Democrats today. Both felt really good about the ground game that they have put together. So now we'll see in about another couple hours or so, where that ground game actually came into play. But it is still fluid. And the big number to pay attention to on that Donnelly-Braun race is the counties that are reporting, how much are they reported, like, the 60, 70%, 80% range. And if they are, because Braun is doing well, he's got to build up enough of a cushion so when the big urban centers start to come in, because that's more likely going to shift to Donnelly, probably by a 2-1 margin.
Okay, so no surprises yet, right? As far as you can tell, anyway.
The only little bit of surprise I see is up in the 2nd Congressional District, Jackie Walorski. I expect her maybe win a little bit more, but right now she's ahead by about 11 points. But in politics, a win is a win no matter how you slice it.
Compare tonight to other midterm years, if you can.
This is not your father's midterm, or matter of fact, this isn't your big brother's midterm, because the voter turnout has just been so massive in and around Indiana. Matter of fact, we're across the country. And I always tell people, whether you like or hate Donald Trump, he has done more to increase voter turnout, than any sort of MTV Rock the Vote or any of the other sort of what I call the do-gooder vote program. So, love him or hate him, he can get people to the polls.
Has social media had an impact on that as well?
Unfortunately, yes, because social media, I always say, is where people who are uninformed can reach out to people who are misinformed.
Right.
And so the challenge has always been just sort of this misinformation about all sorts of things, balanced budget amendments, the candidates, just the personal attacks. So hopefully, after this election over, maybe people take a little bit of a social media break and get outside and get some fresh air and some exercise and get some perspective back.
So you guys are hanging out here in the newsroom, watching the numbers come in as we are as well. You're not on air right now because the IU basketball game is. Afterwards, you guys come on and chat about this, right? Yeah. What's the plan?
The game plan is when IU basketball is over, we take over and we'll provide the folks at home with the in-depth coverage that they've come to expect and deserve.
Okay. Abdul, thank you very much, sir.
Phil, no problem.
We'll check back in with you in a little while. The last time I saw you, though, you had a mustache.
Oh, this will be back. This starts growing back tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning? Okay.
Morning.
Well, there you go. Good to see you, sir. We'll see you in a little while. There you have it, guys. Kind of just a little feel for what's going on here on election night here at WIBC. Very busy newsroom, as you can imagine, as it is back at WISH TV as well. We'll send it back to you guys now in the studio.
Yeah, the mustache might be back by the time this whole election is over.
I know. It's going to be a long night. Phil and Abdul, thanks so much. Hey, we want to look at some of the races because so far a lot of the U.S. House races have been called. So let's go through these here quickly. Just starting in District 1, this has been called for Democrat Peter Visklosky with 69% of the vote.
Yeah, this is according to CNN, who are calling some of these races. In the 2nd Congressional District, we have Jackie Orlowski with 57% of the vote, Republican, over Democrat Mel Hall with 43%.
All right, and moving on to District 3, Jim Banks, 67% of the vote over Courtney Trich with 33%, and that is final.
District 4 is going to another Republican with 68% of the vote, Jim Baird over Toby Beck.
District 5, if we have it next, it has not. Oh, okay. Before we move on to District 6, District 5 has not been called yet. That is incumbent Republican Susan Brooks against Dee Thornton, so we're watching that closely as well. District 6 has been called, and that is Greg Pence over Janine Lake.
Yeah, and going on to another Pence one of the Pence brothers, right? In the 7th Congressional District, they're ready to call that one. Andre Carson, a Democrat, winning there with 63% of the vote over Wayne Harmon.
And District 8, Larry Bouchon with 69% over William Tenusa with 31%.
Yes, there's only 2 races that have been called in District 9 right now. Not comfortable to call this right yet with 38% of the precincts reporting. But Terry Hollinsworth right now with a 62% lead over Liz Watson, another Republican leading in that congressional district.
Okay, so as always, the results are scrolling at the bottom of your screen. You can watch those as they come in. And as well, right here on wishtv.com, you can always check those out as well. All right, we want to go to David Williams. He is our State House Bureau Chief, and he has been at the JW Marriott all night with a GOP watch party there. David, good evening.
Hey, Brooke and Mike, good evening to you. Ours is one of the tightest U.S. Senate races in the nation. Even now, the results are coming in, and it is neck and neck, as you have seen all night long. The big question, who is going to win this race? Voters have turned out all day, even in the days and weeks before, for early voting. One of those voters is joining me right now, Joshua Dahl. Thank you for being with us. First, you voted early. Now you're here. Describe how you're feeling and how that voting process was for you.
I'm feeling really excited. I'm excited for Mike and to see what's in store for him. Voting for me was really quick and easy. I early voted in Lebanon Courthouse, and there was no wait times or anything, so it was a nice, easy process.
The results are coming in as we speak. We're watching them right now on wishtv.com. This race between Joe Donnelly and Mike Braun is neck and neck. It keeps fluctuating, but very closely. What do you make of that race, and where do you predict the outcome to be?
I think that Mike will pull off the victory. I know that Joe has some supporters throughout northern Indiana, but I know that Mike has a great grassroots network and that they'll come out and support him.
There was a recent Harvard University poll that said more millennials turned out to vote in this midterm than in the last midterm, maybe even before that. You're one of them. Talk about that, and what do you make that so many people from your generation turned out to the polls?
I think that social media played a big role in this year's election, like Twitter and Instagram, Facebook. A lot of people have been encouraging us to get out and vote, like from celebrities to other leaders in the community. Everyone's been encouraging everyone to get out and vote, and I think that's very important. And millennials realize that this is a very important election, especially for the presidential election coming up. And so it's good that this generation has taken the initiative and realized that this is a very important race.
You've probably gotten alerts on your cell phone, Facebook, Twitter, even seen ads on YouTube or Spotify. Do you think both campaigns, or the Braun campaign perhaps, reaching out to millennials like yourself that way, has that worked?
I think it has some impact, especially like scrolling through Instagram or something and you see a political ad. Even though you might not take the time to click the link that it sends you, you still see the message that it says, and I think that's very important still.
As a millennial Hoosier voter, do you predict a blue wave sweeping across our state or a red wave coming across our state?
I think Indiana will stay red. I see a red wave sweeping across the whole United States, and that Trump will keep the House and Senate.
Joshua Dahl, thank you so much for being with us. You hear it from voters as we continue to talk this evening. People don't know how the race will turn out, but people, at least here, are hopeful that Mike Braun and the Republican ticket will clinch those seats and keep Republican control. So we are watching these results and talking to voters and people here. We'll bring back with you some more people as we get them. So we'll send it back to you.
All right, David, thank you so much. As either JW Marriott for the Republican Watch Party. Let's now send it over to the Democratic Watch Party, and that's going on right now at the Hyatt downtown. And our Eric Feldman is down there with the state senator as well, Democrat Eddie Melton. Hey, Eric.
Hey there, Mike. So we're joined by Senator Eddie Melton from the 3rd District up in Lake County. You came down here, why today? Because you're not up for re-election.
That's right. I wanted to come down and support
all of our candidates up and down the ticket, especially U.S. Senator Joe Donnelly. Tonight's a great night. Feeling very inspired, especially after this great weekend with President Barack Obama coming to Gary, Indiana, in my district. And I believe we had a great turnout.
Were you there for that speech?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was it like?
You know, it was electrifying. We had over 7,000 people in the Gary Genesis Convention Center, not just from Gary, Indiana, but across the entire state of Indiana. So I think that played a very vital role in our turnout in early voting.
Now, what does it mean when you have former President Obama coming, but you also have President Trump making 3 trips in like the last week and a half coming? You have the last 2 presidents really showing a presence here. What does that do to a race like Senator Donnelly's and Mike Braun's, where it's highly contentious and it's already a close race?
Right. When you look at the words that President Obama spoke was more uplifting and inspiring, and spoke to Joe's credibility, spoke to Joe's experience in the U.S. Senate. When you listen to President Trump's rhetoric in terms of being very divisive and antagonistic, it's 2 different types of conversations. And I think it inspired folks to look at this race totally different.
I took a peek at our computer where we have the AP polling up, and it shows Senator Donnelly down by double digits, but at the same time, it shows that he is winning Allen County. What do you make of that? Put on your analyst hat for a second. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that says a lot. You know, for a highly leaning Republican district, for him to be winning that district currently right now as it stands, I think that speaks volumes.
Are there any state races that you're going to be watching that you think people at home should be paying attention to?
I think we need to look at what Jim Harper is doing as Secretary of State race, John Aguilera, as well as Jocelyn Whitaker. Those are some very encouraging races and candidates that we have to take a look at. But also in our state legislature is extremely important when we look at the Senate. Right now, I'm one of 9 members of the Senate Democrats, and hopefully we pick up a few seats tonight.
State Senator Eddie Melton, thank you so much for taking the time. We're going to send it back to the studio.
All right, Eric, thanks so much.
Yeah, we're continuing to follow these races as well, both here online at wishtv.com and also at Wish TV. And we'll also be back here at 10 o'clock tonight with the latest on the, hopefully some of these results will start pouring in. Right now, we've only called some of the districts right now, the first, the second, and most of them going to Republicans for these congressional districts. And we're still waiting on the results from the 5th congressional district as well as the 9th congressional district.
As well as the all-important Senate race that we're following very closely. We have crews all over central Indiana tonight at both watch parties and at our news gathering partner WIBC as well. Right now, we're going to cut into the CW to give them an election update, so just hang with us.
Live from Wish TV, this is News 8, your local election headquarters.
And we're keeping an eye on things, especially in that tight Senate race right now between Mike Braun and Joe Donnelly, and of course Lucy Brenton as well. I want to give you the latest results. 56% right now, with 33% of precincts reporting goes to Mike Braun.
And regarding the balanced budget question, public question, that has passed with a resounding yes. More results on wishtv.com. All right, and we are back here with you on wishtv.com. Thanks for holding with us. I'm sorry, where are we going? Okay, let's go to David Williams. He is live at the Republican watch party at the JW Marriott. He is with Brian Bosma tonight. David.
Ooh, yeah. Hey, I'm here live with House Speaker Brian Bosma. So we are one of the people here. You are running for re-election. How are you feeling? How's the race going?
Well, honestly, it was great to see so many people out at the polls today. And regardless of how anything turns out for anyone, it's good to see Hoosiers engaged. It's good to see people all over the country fully engaged in the political process. So we really don't know yet. It's too early. So all we've really received is early voting counts in Marion County. And, it all looks good. We got our fingers crossed. But we're just hopeful for a good night.
Are you nervous or excited?
We're always excited, never nervous. So this was the day for the voters to have their say, and the Republic will survive regardless of the results.
There are historic numbers of voters, early voters, across the entire state, here in Marion County, across our whole state. What do you make of the fact that so many people came to the polls and voted early for a midterm election?
Yeah, I think it's the national environment, in part created by the president, and people either love him or hate him. And the Kavanaugh hearings, it's just a lot of different things that have caused people on both sides of the political aisle, at both extremes even, to be very, very energized and come out and encourage their families to do the same. And that's not a bad thing. It's good for the rhetoric is too loud. There's too much yelling among people, but it's good to have people enthused, wanting to support their democracy, regardless of which side of the aisle, the many sides of the aisle they're voting.
How would you describe the political climate in Indiana and in our nation right now? Some would say it's divisive.
It is divisive. It's too divisive, in my opinion. We'll continue to run the Indiana House if I'm so fortunate as to be reelected and have the opportunity to lead again in a bipartisan and very civil fashion as we have for the last decade. It's really been a crucible of civility that's been a model for the rest of the legislative branches around the country. We'll continue to do that. Hopefully we'll have folks on both Republicans and Democrats that want to continue that strong culture.
We're live on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, our website. Thank you for watching, by the way. Talk directly to our voters who are watching right now. Talk directly to them about what you want them to know about this election cycle, about you and your campaign. Speak to them from your heart.
It's just, I'm a strong believer in the democratic process, in community service. I've obviously served for almost 3 decades now, and it's been my honor and privilege to do so. And your state government works. It's really changed Indiana, the face of Indiana, over the last decade, really over the last 15 years, from being a flyover state where people couldn't get good jobs to now one of the top economic engines in the country, with some of the lowest taxes in the nation on individuals and corporations, and really the most opportunity, certainly in the Midwest, and at the top 5 or 6 in the nation. So we care. Republicans and Democrats care, and we may disagree exactly how to make these things happen, but your public servants truly desire to serve.
As we expand out to the nation, the country is watching Indiana. We are one of the most tightly and hotly contested U.S. Senate races in the nation. What do you make that the whole country is watching us right now?
Well, I think we have 2 very good candidates. I know both of them very well. Mike Braun was a part of our House Republican team. I've known Joe Donnelly for a decade as we've worked on matters of mutual concern, and while they disagree on a lot of issues, they're both qualified. They'll both carry a strong Hoosier message to the Capitol. Personally, I voted for Mike Braun. And hope he wins, but also believe Joe Donnelly is a man of integrity. I'm glad the ads are going to be over, because if people truly voted in accordance with the ads, you wouldn't vote for anyone, because everyone is just so negative. Unfortunately, that moves votes.
There was a lot of mud being slinged back and forth this early.
It was really terrible. Yeah.
With the state,
it'll all be over tonight. There may be some hangover commercials tomorrow, but all that stuff will be done, and we'll be glad at our household.
With the state house, I know there's some different seats up for election. Talk about that balance of power. Could that power shift from a supermajority, or do you think it'll stay the same?
There are 6 or 7 seats that we're watching closely around the state that could go either way. Historically, in the last decade, we haven't lost all of those. So my hope is that we minimize those losses to just a couple. That would maintain a supermajority. In all honesty, supermajority is not that important. We were able to govern with 52 in 2005. We were able to turn Indiana in a new direction. We were able to govern strongly with 60 members in 2010. We've had a supermajority since then, and it isn't all it's cracked up to be sometimes. So there'll be a strong Republican majority one way or the other, strong leaders committed to moving our state forward, and we'll work closely with our Democrat colleagues to make good things happen.
All right, how are you feeling about tonight? Big picture, how are you feeling in your heart of hearts?
Too early. It was because the polls were so heavily populated today, the reporting's slow, so we're not overconfident about anything, but I do believe it's going to be a good night for Republicans.
Cautiously optimistic?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, House Speaker Brian Bosma. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. So you just heard that was House Speaker Brian Bosma. You know, he is one of the people who was closely watching this race and to see who will come out on top. So we're going to continue to find more people to talk to. We are live at the Republican Party headquarters and watch party in downtown Indianapolis. I'm David Williams, WIBC TV.
All right, David, thanks so much. Let's go to a very local level for Marion County, and that's the IPS school district. And they had 2 referendums on the ballot this midterm election. The first here is a property tax hike to fund teachers and student services, with 41% of precincts reporting about 71% of voters said yes, they would support that property tax hike.
And here's the other one, and it looks like they're both going to pass, which is pretty good for the school district. Property tax hike to fund safety and modernization project as well. And you can see it's 76% right now to just 24%. So pretty overwhelming numbers there for both of those to pass.
Yeah, it definitely says something. Amanda Friesen is a professor of political science at IUPUI. She's been with us all night, kind of lending some insight. And does this come as a surprise to you, these numbers?
When you consider that the Democrat Andre Carson, just won Marion County by 65% of the vote, the kinds of voters who would turn out for him and for his platform would also be interested in funding the city schools. So that seems to be pretty in line with what we would expect. I think this also suggests, in 2020, as candidates are looking for platforms to run on, things to campaign on, et cetera, to look at these referendum or these ballot initiatives that are happening in various places in the state, and to show, this is basically a public opinion poll of people who turn out to vote. 76% are in favor of improving education, even if it costs them something.
Yeah, nobody likes to have a tax hike,
Right.
for a property tax. So it's pretty impressive that people are invested this much that want to see IPS succeed.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, on more of a national scale, but obviously a big state race here is the race for U.S. Senate between Joe Donnelly and Mike Braun. We've been watching it closely. We're still very much interested in seeing how that's going right now, with 37% of precincts reporting 57% have chosen Mike Braun over Joe Donnelly's 39%. Still a long way to go in that race. But we want to talk about the money that has been spent behind this election, not just by both of the candidates, although that's been significant as well, but outside groups. I mean, it's hard to watch any channel this past few weeks and not be inundated with campaign ads.
Right. There's also been a kind of informal contest that I've noticed on social media platforms, people displaying how many different mailers they got. Like, I got 10 political mailers today, alone for school district and other kinds of local races. So
getting on the phone too,
text messages.
Right.
Right. The number of text messages that people have received from campaigns, from the parties, and get out the vote organizations. Definitely. 2018 outspent 2014 when it comes to these types of campaign spending, and some of that is, perhaps people trying to put money into the blue wave, as they talk about, so trying to fund some Democratic candidates. You look at Beto O'Rourke in Texas, the amount of money that's been spent on that campaign to challenge Ted Cruz, who, did pretty well in the Republican primaries, and to unseat an incumbent like that in a state that hasn't seen a Democrat statewide elected official in 20, 30 years is pretty incredible.
He hasn't been unseated yet.
To try to. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
I actually don't think that will happen. No.
See, with like the governor's race going down in Florida, I mean, there's a lot of interesting races out there that are swinging, seems like, to the Democrats now, and outspending some of their Republican opponents.
Yeah, and the last numbers I looked at, I think Republicans are still outspending Democrats in the 2018 races. But the other thing that's happening is these ballot initiatives. So you have everything from marijuana legalization to Medicaid expansion to Florida's Amendment 4, which is to re-enfranchise felons who have been, their ability to vote being taken away. And so, the people who are, pouring money into those kind of campaigns could contribute to getting people out to vote and so on.
Let's talk about one of the funny things you see, like on social media now, is people going, thank goodness tomorrow I don't have to see any campaign ads. But there's been a ton of money spent on not only just on the different people running, but also on different initiatives.
Yeah, definitely. What I think is interesting is I'm teaching gender and politics this semester, and
What does that mean?
So basically, I go through and talk about how men and women might behave differently in American politics. You know, why men and women might run for office at different rates or for different parties, public opinion differences, different public policies that have gendered elements to them. Right. And during the campaign and election week, I always like to show campaign ads from various people in recent elections, and there's an interesting number of women veterans who are running for Congress this year, who are running some really interesting ads where they're showing sort of the strength of...
The woman in Arizona, for example, right? And she's one of the...
So I'm thinking... maybe so. I'm thinking for sure there's a Kentucky...
There's a Senate race, I think.
Yeah, Amy McGrath in Kentucky, who I think is leading. Okay. You know, and she calls out Mitch McConnell in her ad, you know, talking about how she wrote to him about wanting to... do something in particular, I think fly a particular jet or something in the military. And so seeing this sort of like, you know, and then at the end of the ad, picking up their kids and showing, you know, I care about education and healthcare and families, but I can be tough, you know, on foreign policy or that kind of thing.
So it's taking as a female to show that you're also a tough person who can take on Washington.
Right, to show that you have both of these kinds of qualities.
The compassion as well as the toughness.
Yeah, and there's just been some creativity and not just the usual, like, you know, oh, my opponent did this and I did, you know, or whatever kinds of ads that we're used to, or they're just showing clips from the opposition, but kind of some creative cinematography, some good music, and my students were like, they're pretty jaded by a lot of this stuff. They're like, these are cool ads, you know. So
yeah. Has that's been mostly outside of Indiana?
I think that's right. I think that's right.
We've seen a lot of just kind of nasty stuff here in state. It got pretty ugly pretty quickly, but you see why when you look at the numbers. I mean, it's a tight one. Mm-hmm. All right, hey, we want to turn it over to our Phil Sanchez. He is live at our news gathering partner WIBC tonight. As they gear up for their coverage, which is starting shortly here.
That's right, Brooke and Mike. Good evening to you guys once again. Yeah, IU basketball on WIBC right now. Right after that, though, switch on over if you're in your car or listening to the radio. Eric Berman, State House Bureau Chief, been doing this for quite some time, since 1998, he tells me. Eric, good to see you, sir. Thank you for taking some time.
Phil, thanks for having me.
Any surprises tonight so far?
No huge surprises, but some mini surprises up in northern Indiana. We're watching the battle for the Indiana House. Again, no one expects the Republicans to lose their majority in the House, but they could lose their supermajority. They could fall below that two-thirds ironclad majority that they have. They are trailing right now in 2 House races up in Lake County, 1 over in Fort Wayne. 1 more net gain for the Democrats, and that would break the supermajority. But there are some districts that are good for the Republicans tonight as well, where we're waiting for some numbers. So a long way from deciding that one, but a few incumbents may not be returning to Indianapolis.
Yeah, still very early in the evening. Switching gears here to the big race that everyone has an eye on, the Senate race, of course. Where are we right now? I haven't checked the numbers here within the past few minutes.
Yeah, 52-43 is the last that we had, and again, those are fluid because, you know, we're bringing in multiple sources of numbers, as we've discussed here, but that's the best estimate we have right now. What we can say for sure is this is way too close to call. Joe Donnelly's winning Marion County by about 2-1. We're still waiting on numbers from Hamilton County, and for that matter, most of the donut counties. Those are Republican strongholds, and so it's who can turn out their vote more. Mike Braun has been winning in the rural counties. One interesting thing we saw, Joe Donnelly actually leading narrowly in Allen County, but then you look down the ballot, and a lot of Republicans who are going to be walking away with their re-elections are also just leading narrowly. So it's a good performance for Joe Donnelly in Allen, and a good performance may be all he needs. You know, for both of them, hold down the other guy's margin in the other guy's base. So we're watching that one, Lake County, the donut. But we'll see where this one ends up.
Yeah, a lot of people at home like to know how the sausage is made. So how do you get this information? I mean, I'm kind of just sitting back and watching you take it all in. Where's it all coming from?
92 different counties. You know, we've got a crew out in the newsroom calling county clerks, trying to get the numbers. There are multiple websites that, for some of those counties, not everyone has entered the 21st century, but those who do post their numbers, we're getting them there. We've got the Secretary of State is starting to report numbers at this point. It always takes them a while to get on track. They ultimately, of course, are the official vote counter in the state, and so we keep an eye on those as well to fill in some of the gaps that we have out in the smaller counties.
Your experience, which part of the state is the most difficult to get information from?
Hamilton County, beyond question. It always, they are not online. You have to talk to those folks there in person, and it always takes a while. You know, it's a big county with a lot of urban centers. It's a critical county. There are races like Mike Delph's race or Jim Merritt's race that you simply can't call without those numbers. And it generally, the fact that we don't have those numbers yet is about normal. Along about 10 o'clock, we'd hope to start having some significant returns up there.
The Delph race is kind of in question right now, right?
J.D. Ford is doing what you would expect him to do. The Democratic challenger winning by about 2-1 in Marion County. Mike Delph won in Boone County by a narrow margin, about 600, leading by about 600 votes. That wasn't complete last we checked. But Hamilton County is extremely Republican. That is Mike Delph's base in more ways than one. It's heavily Republican, and that is his home territory. And so whatever lead J.D. Ford runs up, you would expect to melt away as the Delph vote comes in, and the question is who has more at the end.
The referendums were also a big hot topic leading up to today. It looks like the IPS has gone through. Your takeaway?
Unsurprising. The referenda seem to pass about half the time statewide, but for the most part in Marion County, we've seen those go through. The Wishart referendum a few years back went through by about a 4-1 margin. IPS has gotten some support when they've been on the ballot before. There's been some townships that have gotten results they didn't want, but for the most part, this has been a pro-referendum area.
I know that you've been keeping your eye on everything locally. Have you had a chance to check in on the national races?
Trying to watch that out of the corner of our eye. One that I'm very interested in, just as a political junkie. There's a Texas congressional race. John Carter, the incumbent Republican there, running against a female veteran who has been running some superb ads. She had one at the beginning of the campaign, just a 2-minute single take thing showing her journey from the battlefield to the congressional race.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
She had one in the last week where the incumbent made the mistake of saying he was in a war, and she put up an ad. He doesn't know anything about war. She used harsher words. She's been running a strong campaign in really a more Republican district. As the Democratic candidate, she'd normally be a long shot. She's leading by a few points there. It's still too close to call, but that one's a race.
Do you think those ads resonate with folks? And I ask that because Donnelly has had some interesting ones this go around as well.
Nothing on that scale. The best ads we've seen in Indiana were back in the primary. Mike Braun had some superb ads in the primary, and that was part of why he won. He ran a very effective campaign there. Nothing has stood out to me. There have been some good ads. I don't know that there have been any terrible ones. But there's been nothing that just really stands out the way that the Texas ads and a couple of others around the country have.
Braun last week decided not to take questions from the media after the debate. I don't know if I've heard. Have you had a chance to find out what the reasoning was behind that?
He's been consistent in that. He said, yeah, we said everything we have to say on the stage. You know, we don't feel a need to rehash it afterward. On the one hand, I understand that. I mean, the debate is the debate. I'm not sure what they're supposed to say in the spin room afterwards. On the other hand, that means that you give Joe Donnelly and Lucy Brenton the stage to themselves. It's a calculation that they made. Honestly, whoever wins this race, I doubt that's going to be a major factor in it, but it definitely raised some eyebrows among us in the media.
Okay, Eric, I'll let you get back to doing some work, and you guys will be on after the IU game, right?
We will. Counting down. I think the game may be over or close to it, but we've still got a post-game show. We will take air just as soon as that obligation is fulfilled.
Busy night, Eric. Thank you for taking some time. We appreciate it. We'll check back in with you in a little while. There you go, guys. Kind of the feeling here at WIBC. We'll send it back to you guys now at Wish TV.
All right, Phil, get ready. They got to get back to work because IU just beat Chicago State pretty well.
Split attention here. Okay.
I kept one eye on it just a little bit. They have to.
All right, back to our election coverage now. We just want to mention that Vice President Mike Pence just tweeted recently to congratulate his brother. He said, "Congrats to my brother, Greg Pence, on being elected to serve in the U.S. Congress. Greg served our country admirably in uniform and will do the same in Washington, D.C. I am so proud and look forward to working with him to advance Donald Trump's agenda for America and the Hoosier state." So again, Greg Pence elected there in District 6. He's actually taking the place that his brother had previously held.
And that's Mike Pence's big brother. Yeah. Right, the vice president's big brother. So there are 2 years separates them. So we want to take it out to toss it out to David Williams right now. He's out to the Republican headquarters. Something going on out there that we need to know about?
Hey, we actually, just a couple seconds ago, I believe it's ABC News on the monitors that they're watching, just called Mike Braun. They have projected that Mike Braun will win over Joe Donnelly, and they have also projected that Greg Pence has won House District 6. And joining me right now is Jana Urban. She's Republican. You just watched the news. We watched it together.
Okay.
How are you feeling about what we just saw?
I am so excited that Indiana has gone red again, that we have both senators that are Republican once again. That's the way it should be. Hoosiers have come home to their Indiana Republican roots.
And you were telling me you voted today.
Yes, I did.
How was the voting experience for you?
I went this morning at 9:30, and there were so many people there, the wait was about an hour and a half long. So I left, and then I went back again this afternoon at 3, and it took me 40 minutes at 3 o'clock to vote in Carmel.
And we were talking, you have seen so many political ads from both the Donnelly camp and from Mike Braun's campaign. There's been a lot of mudslinging.
Yeah.
How did these commercials, when you watched them, how did you feel about it?
I'm a firm believer that there's so much fake news on both sides, to be honest. So I think whether it was Donnelly or whether it was Mike Braun or any ad in the nation, that there's so much mudslinging, and that's just the way of politics today. I think many polls show that those ads work. So I don't think that they're going to go away anytime in the future, unfortunately.
Tonight, we're all watching these results come in second by second. We just saw one of the national networks already project a Republican winner. How are you feeling? We're still counting the results in Indiana. How are you feeling watching all of this unfold before your eyes?
Oh, I'm thrilled. They just called Mike Braun, so I'm thrilled for Mike. I think he's done an excellent job. I think he'd do an excellent job. He's a businessman. He's made payroll. He knows what it's like to have employees. He understands what tax cuts do for employees, cost of health care, also how important getting rid of some of the restrictions on small businesses are, and I think that's what we need. That's what Trump has brought to the game, is he's not a politician, he's not a lawyer, and Mike Braun wasn't a politician, and he wasn't a lawyer either. And I think we need more businessmen in politics today.
Before I let you go, you and I were talking earlier. She's wearing this red dress. She was telling me that it's your lucky Trump dress.
It is my lucky Trump dress.
She said you had worn it maybe I think a month or a year or so ago.
I wore it in March of 2016 when Trump was running in the Indiana primary.
Now tell me, do you think your red lucky dress will work again tonight?
It did. Mike Braun already won.
You're probably going to wear it again.
Yes, I am. I'm going to keep it on all night, so hopefully we win in Arizona, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, and Montana, and Missouri.
All right, Ms. Jana Urban, thank you so much for this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you.
You too. So there you have it. These results are coming in by the second. You heard another national news outlet already call Greg Pence and Mike Braun as the winner. We are still, of course, waiting for other results to come in. But you can hear as these results come in on the big screens, people are definitely reacting to these incredibly tight races right here at home. We're live downtown at the Republican Watch Party. I'm David Williams, Wish TV, News 8.
Hi, David. Thank you. A lot of cheering going on out there. Obviously, ABC News is calling that race, so we'll still wait for the, of course, the final results. But that happened pretty quick. I thought we'd be around here for a while waiting for that race to finally be decided.
A huge development, obviously. That's just one outlet calling it as ABC. So we want to check in with our Eric Feldman. He is at the Democratic Watch Party downtown at the Hyatt. Eric, we just talked to David Williams with the GOP Watch Party. ABC is calling it for Mike Braun. Has there been talk about that where you are?
Yeah, well, right now, I mean, we're seeing it on the screen too, but when I talked to the campaign officials, the campaign communications director for Senator Donnelly's team just, I'd say, 10, 15 minutes ago, he didn't express any real concern at that point. Now, that was before we saw the news and before we heard David talking about ABC calling the race. So when we're done here, we're going to go check in with them to see what they have to say, if there is any response, and we'll make sure to get back to you with that information as soon as we learn it. But right now, we're being joined by someone who volunteers in a lot of elections, Patrice Duckett, who's from Indianapolis. And Why do you volunteer in elections? You said you do it every year.
Yeah, I have to do it every year. It's really important that we show our voice and that we speak with our vote. So if we are not out there making sure that people understand what we want and how we want it, then they're going to do what they need to do or what they want to do. And so it's so important for us to get on the ground, knock on doors, make phone calls to get people out there and vote.
And you said you have been out supporting all Democratic candidates, but the numbers show Senator Donnelly is down double digits. We're hearing some outlets, we have not confirmed it, but some outlets, and we haven't heard from the Donnelly team yet, some outlets have started calling it for Braun. What's your initial reaction to this?
Well, the night is not over. So I believe that with us being on the ground and doing our grassroots work, going door to door, we still got votes to count, and I won't count it out until every vote is counted.
And you said that you have some excitement about some of the state races that you have helped campaign for and make calls for. Which ones are those?
So I am totally excited about J.D. Ford. I'm excited about D. Thornton. I really want to see them go out and win. They knocked on almost every door in their district. They made sure that people understood what they were standing for, and they listened to everybody that they talked to.
You said that the most common problem you face when you go out knocking on doors, making phone calls, is people don't understand the importance of their vote. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, education is key. I think the biggest thing is that people need to know that every election is important. Every day that they go out, they need to vote, and every time that they have a problem, they need to speak up about it. So it's all about education and understanding why it's so important to be here and be at the ballots every year.
If it happens to be that Mike Braun does win this Senate seat, and in January he becomes the next senator for the state of Indiana, this has been a tough race. It's been talked about at the national level. There have been a lot of negative campaign ads. I'm sure you've seen them. How does the state move forward and unite if it's Mike Braun, if it's Joe Donnelly? Right now it is Mike Braun is winning by double digits. How do Hoosiers like yourself who didn't support him, how do you get behind a candidate like him?
I don't know how to get behind a candidate yet, but I do know my power. So even if it's not my ideal candidate, he will hear me, and he will understand what I need as a resident and as a mother. So if that means going to his door, and that means sitting in his office, does that mean making sure that he hears me on the phone, he will get that every single time.
Patrice, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time.
All right.
And again, we're going to go check in with the Donnelly team shortly to see if they have any update from their end after what we heard from David Williams over at the Braun Watch Party, just a couple blocks away from where we are at the Hyatt Regency. So we'll get that answer, and we'll check back in with you guys shortly. So I'm going to send it back to you guys.
All right, Eric, thank you. Once again, this is from ABC News that we're hearing that Mike Braun has been declared the winner in the Senate race. And, of course, people are still going to remain out there at Donnelly's camp just to make sure that this is indeed fact when all the votes are counted.
All right, we want to move on to District 9 of the U.S. House race.
We're making a call right now for the Republican Trey Hollingsworth. CNN is calling this 63% to Liz Watson's 37%.
I believe the only district that has not been called is District 5, so we'll keep an eye on that. That is Susan Brooks versus D. Thornton. But this has been called, I believe, these are absentee ballots only. Thank you for that correction. Absentee ballots only. Hamilton County Sheriff, Dennis Quakenbush with 55%, Jason Straw 43%. Again, absentee ballots only, so that's a close one. We'll keep watching. The other one is Noblesville school referendum. This is a property tax hike to fund enhanced school security measures as well as teacher salaries. Absentee ballots only. 58% have voted yes for that.
Yeah, and obviously very similar to what was happening with Indiana Public Schools as well.
Let's go to David Williams. He is live at the GOP watch party at the JW Marriott downtown, where a lot of excitement is building, especially after ABC calling it for Mike Braun tonight. What is the mood there? Should I even have to ask, David?
Well, Brooke, there's jubilation here, and there's actually some uncertainty because we're hearing that the other networks are watching. Fox News, that outlet, is reporting that the race between Mike Braun and Joe Donnelly is actually too close to call. So even in the same room, they're watching two different networks with two different outcomes or results, if you will, because it is just so close in these races. So joining me now is Jeff Miller. He's from Brownsburg, Trump supporter. And you were telling me, well, first, you're watching both these networks. A lot of people here, you're kind of getting pulled in both directions. How are you feeling, and what do you make of what you're watching?
Well, I'm very optimistic. I had come into the evening knowing that it was going to be close, following it very closely, and hopeful because Mike seemed to be ahead most of the night, and surprised that they called it this early, but elated that they have.
That's just one network. As we've seen, there's another national network that's saying it's just too close to call. What do you make of that? Because this is a very close race.
Well, I think the numbers are still in our favor. I think there's going to be some hesitancy from all the networks to make that call, but I think the trend of the numbers is good, and I think it looks good.
How would you describe, I guess, the environment? Are you excited, or are you cautiously optimistic?
I would say I'm creeping a little past cautiously optimistic at this point. I came into the evening at that point, and I think as the numbers are coming in now, I think we've got it.
I think there's more from ABC News, forgive me, that is projecting that Mike Braun again with the U.S. Senator over Joe Donnelly and Lucy Brenton. Again, that is just one network reporting. We're working to get these results coming in and confirmed via WISH TV. So you and I were talking. You used to be a Democrat and then switched to a Republican. When did you make that switch, and why?
Well, I made that switch gradually, primarily as I had 4 daughters, became more sensitive to pro-life and on fiscal matters. And I really, this is the first time I've ever campaigned or volunteered for anyone, and it's really been because of President Trump and because of Mike Braun.
So you were out there in the grassroots campaigning, door knocking. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, it was great. I mean, Hendricks County is pretty red, so it was pretty uplifting. But there were also, it's a turbulent time, so there was a little bit of mixed emotions, but for the most part, it was a great experience.
Where do you see the evening progressing? Do you forecast a red wave sweeping through Indiana, or do you think the opposite, a blue wave across Indiana?
Well, I think in Indiana we're going to get a red wave, but I think nationally, still most of my family is Democratic, and they're all over the country, and so I'm cautiously optimistic on the national level, but I'm very optimistic here in Indiana.
Do you think other people in the same room? Because, I'm looking around and seeing the people are glued to their phones. They're glued to these TV screens, because I would say people in this room don't even know for sure what tonight's outcome is going to be.
Right. Well, there's definitely a lot of uncertainty. I've been here since about 6:30, and there wasn't a lot of people here, and the enthusiasm, I think, is slowly starting to build up. But I think that would reflect the fact that nationally there's a little bit of apprehension, but I think as the night progresses, it's going to become more and more enthusiastic.
Okay. Jeff Miller, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. Thank you for being with us. Yeah, you are hearing it directly from voters. We've got different networks reporting different outcomes. I can tell you, people, if we could swing the camera around, people's eyes are glued to the TV screens, also glued to their phones as they are watching these results come in. You heard it from Jeff Miller. Some of the folks in this room, they honestly don't know how this race is going to pan out, talking about the U.S. Senate race between Mike Braun and Joe Donnelly. We've already heard that at WISH TV we have projected that Greg Pence will win his House district over his opponent. But you can see people in this room, they are checking these results by the second, by the minute, continually refreshing to see where these numbers and statistics are and where they're going. Because as you hear it, even in this room, people are cautiously optimistic and they are continuing to watch these numbers. But you heard him say that he is excited, and you can kind of feel that excitement in the room too. But we are continuing to take the pulse of the room, talk to people, talk to folks who are here, and see how they're feeling. So we are live at the JW Marriott in downtown Indianapolis. I'm David Williams. Back to you.
All right, David, thanks so much.
All right, got a few things we're following here locally as well. We just told you about the congressional race in the 9th District, and that went to Trey Hollingsworth as he wins re-election to the U.S. House in that district.
Also following closely the Madison County Sheriff race, it looks like it is now final with all precincts counted. Scott Mellinger, Democrat, looks to have edged out Larry Crenshaw, a Republican there in Madison County for sheriff. Amanda Friesen has been joining us all night. She is a political science professor at IUPUI. Let's talk about this Senate race. ABC calling it for Mike Braun, but interestingly enough, the GOP Watch Party not exactly celebrating yet. They're more watchful, maybe hopeful would be a better word, but certainly early to be calling this one. And are we seeing a trend here with, quote, the outsider after President Trump was elected, Mike Braun kind of following suit here?
Yeah, I think the whole notion of I'm an outsider, I'm going to go to Washington and fix things is very appealing to the American people. Congress has the lowest approval rating of any institution in the United States. But there's this great phenomenon where people hate Congress but love their Congress member.
Come back, right.
Yeah. And so there's this idea that, okay, well, this person who I can relate to, they're from my state, they own a business, they are some kind of, they're a teacher, et cetera. They're going to go to Washington and they're going to fix things for all the people over there that have screwed it up. And so it's a trend that's been happening in politics for a while. It's in tension with, do you want people who are in Washington who know what they're doing, who've built relationships? But look at the Senate race 6 years ago. It was my very first year in Indiana, and I was asked to comment on the Donnelly-Murdoch race. And, Senator Lugar was, or is, one of the most well-respected statesmen from the Hoosier state. And he was unseated because people felt like he wasn't paying enough attention to Hoosiers, even though I've heard people from, other representatives from other states and, talk about just the value of having Senator Lugar in Washington and the things that he knew about foreign policy and so on. But, if you feel like Washington's broken, then the thing to do is to send somebody new.
Right.
Yeah. You probably have taught a course on this, but I find this really fascinating too. This race and with social media now and the several different platforms we can get directly to people, where everybody's on their phone right now, just how that has impacted a lot of these races.
Yeah, certainly we have a subfield in political science called political communication. And at one time, it mainly, the way to study how people were getting their information was, okay, let's do a content analysis of the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal, and let's see what the headlines are. Let's see, what kinds of stories are being talked about, or let's look at local markets and see what stories are being covered. Increasingly, that has shifted to looking at people. I have some colleagues who study, how the differences in reading news on your phone versus your computer, and the way that Facebook, for example, configures the headline and whether the photo is bigger or the caption's bigger, and then what people remember from that. So definitely, it's being studied to see if people, and as you may imagine, when people read news on their phone, like as they're walking and so on, they don't remember it as much as if.
And not only that, but I think
screen.
the first time in history you have a president who can directly contact you.
Yeah.
That you're sending out tweets today, just vote for this person, he has my support. I mean, you can't get better, marketing from, if you're in support of the president and his policies, to go directly to another person.
Yeah, certainly President Obama tweeted as well. He was, he was tweeted less.
Yes, just a little bit.
Than the current president. But you know, and that's the other thing with Obama in 2008, his use of YouTube. His use of, you know, a variety of platforms to try to reach younger voters, and not just using typical TV news, newspapers.
I think that's a trend we will only continue to see grow
Absolutely.
and grow and grow. Our Eric Feldman is live at the Hyatt Regency downtown. He is with the Democratic Watch Party. Eric, good evening to you. David Williams at the GOP Watch Party. Not exactly a celebration yet, but hopeful over there. What's the atmosphere where you're at?
Well, it's definitely getting more crowded. We just had a flood of people come in, including Prosecutor Terry Curry from Marion County. But there's definitely been a bit of an air knocked out of the room as we saw a couple of outlets posting that they're projecting that Mike Braun wins the U.S. Senate race. But I just about 2 minutes ago talked with the campaign communications director for Joe Donnelly. And I asked him, is there any update on your end? And he said, not right now. We'll let you know. Right now, we're looking at our own internal data. They're not ready to say this race is over at this point in time. So right now, we're in a holding pattern. But I will say that a lot of the top campaign officials that are here, they did leave the room for a long time when we saw that ABC alert come out. Some of them have started to come back in, so we'll see if there is anything that changes in the not-too-distant future. But right now, the Donnelly campaign is still holding out hope that there could be a bit of a boost coming for the senators' numbers in the remaining voter numbers that haven't been counted yet. So we'll continue to track that. I will bring back something that we heard from Senator Donnelly earlier tonight. He did say he thought it could be a long night. I heard you guys talking about it. This was called earlier than, at least by some of these outlets, earlier than we thought it could have been. One of the questions that was asked of Senator Donnelly by another reporter was about the Kavanaugh vote. He voted no on Judge Kavanaugh, and there was some early exit polling numbers that said that a majority of voters felt strongly about that and whether he thought it could have been a positive or negative, and he said he didn't know at that time. It'll be interesting to see whenever, if this race is called for Mike Braun, what Senator Donnelly or what his campaign team says about how this race has been going from the get-go, and what may have caused voters to turn to Mike Braun. But again, right now, the campaign is saying at this point in time, they are still looking at their own data, and they are going to keep us updated, but there is no concession happening here at this time. But again, it hasn't been, it's just loud, I would say, because there are a lot of people here. There are cheers that you occasionally hear when some of the TVs that are on, when they show a positive result or outcome for other candidates around the country. They're watching some of the other Senate races, some of the other amendments and ballot items from other states. So they're keeping an eye on that, and that's when you'll hear a cheer, but definitely a bit of the air knocked out of the room, I would say, since the news started trickling out that some outlets were saying that Mike Braun is going to become the next senator for Indiana. So we'll let you know if we hear anything else, but I'll send it back to you guys.
All right, Eric, there might be some sad faces over there in a little bit. We're still getting the numbers coming in. At first, we told you ABC News had called it for Mike Braun. Now we're getting it from CBS and NBC as well. They are calling the race for Mike Braun. As we take a look at the numbers that we have right here, with 51% of precincts reporting Mike Braun with 54% of the votes, Joe Donnelly at 42%.
Yeah, we want to bring in Amanda Friesen, Associate Professor of Political Science at IUPUI. An interesting kind of takeaway from this race is Lucy Brenton. We haven't even mentioned her name very much. She had 4% of the vote. People were wondering if she would kind of sway some voters away from either Braun or Donnelly. Do you think that she played much of a role in kind of the swing in this election, or maybe not so much?
Yeah, the third-party vote is a challenging thing to think about and to ask, right? To wonder if people would have gone another direction. Certainly in 2016, that was a lot of the story in those really tight counties in Wisconsin and in Michigan, you know, where Gary Johnson and Jill Stein perhaps, you know, took a chunk of the votes that might have gone, another direction, perhaps
spoiler, if you will.
To Hillary Clinton. And so, there are some people who, maybe are always going to vote for that third-party candidate if they feel strongly about being a libertarian or to that extent. But I'll be curious in years to come how much third parties are going to get votes, right? And if that becomes part of the national conversation, that maybe the two lead parties aren't your exact platform, right, but, are you voting sort of for... A lot of people are voting against a candidate rather than just in favor of one.
Well, some may have done that in the 2016 election.
Absolutely, right. And so if you're really, if you don't particularly like, let's say you lean Republican, but you're really a libertarian, you might decide in certain races, okay, well, I dislike the Democrats so much, I'm going to vote for the Republican because
I don't want to waste my vote.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it was interesting because Lucy Brenton, after the debate at Newfields, said, it wasn't even her intent to win. She said, I want to get 10% of the vote because if the Libertarian Party can get 10% of the vote, we get access to voting records. We get access to all of this information that really puts the Libertarian Party at a disadvantage because it's information that Braun and Donnelly campaigns have.
And she was probably the clearest in that debate, too, about her platform and what she stood for. She had nothing to lose, so it made the debate very interesting as well.
But yeah, I mean, with the third party, I think a lot of people are hungry for more options other than the two-party system, but it's how do you get there? How do you get to the place where you have a viable third party that's bringing about viable candidates and resources?
So we have to restructure our elections in order to do that.
It's not easy.
It's just very simple.
Okay.
Might have to amend the Constitution, who's to say? Because we have single-member plurality districts, right? So we don't have multi-member districts. We don't have proportional representation like in other areas of the world. As long as you have, just you're voting for one person in this particular district, and that's your only option, it's going to lend itself to a two-party system.
Sure.
So it's going to be very difficult for a third party to be a part of that. You could see it on some state levels, perhaps, like there might be that kind of option, but certainly for national offices, I think it's going to be difficult for a third party to be viable.
Yeah, I remember years ago, I'm old enough to remember Ross Perot when he was running in that third party, and he took away all the votes from
Ralph
Bush.
Nader in 2000.
Sure. Right,
yeah.
It's been trying to gain that relevancy. And also one thing, I just read a stat from somebody out in Colorado. It was the first time that the unaffiliated voters outnumbered Republicans in voting in that state. So maybe you see some more of that with the millennials and, as a lot of these people that are coming up that don't affiliate with one way of the Democrats or the Republicans.
Yeah, there is I have a couple of colleagues, Samara Klar and it doesn't matter. Another author that you guys don't know, who wrote this book about independent politics, so about independence and the rise of independence. And a lot of it has to do with people not liking to be a part of the party. So, they feel like party politics is, just kind of nasty you're selling out, and it's this kind of point of pride. Well, I'm an independent. I look at every candidate, I weigh, what they say, et cetera, and then I make my decision. But what we know from decades of political science research and polling and voting records is that people tend to vote for the same party. Right. There isn't, a large number.
They're not truly independent.
Or you just want to be on the winning team. You want a chance to be with the winners, and I mean that's just a psychological thing.
Yeah.
I
So
think,
voting
for
Democrat in Indiana, you might think, well, maybe I should reevaluate, right, or something.
Right. It is interesting, and it's something that will be interesting to see if it grows, if the momentum follows. But certainly we're seeing a little bit of that here with this Senate race.
I just found it, in some of these more progressive states where you see the fact that there's the independents are outnumbering these folks. It's maybe it's an interesting trend that will continue. Right. Probably not in the state of Indiana necessarily, but in other places. We'll see. Do we have David at all by chance?
We have Eric.
We have Eric.
Eric Feldman is at the Democratic Watch Party at the Hyatt downtown. Eric, we'll go back to you now.
Hey there. So we're joined right now by State Senator Karen Talion, who represents two counties up in northern Indiana.
Right.
So tell us about what you think about how the night's been going so far.
Well, we've had a terrible problem in Porter County, Indiana. The clerk's office, the elections used to be run by the voter registration office. This year, they changed to be run by the clerk's office. And we've had nothing but problems for 2-3 weeks, and tonight, we have a terrible mess. We had many precincts that were opened late today. We had to get a court order to extend voting time.
It did stay open late, though.
Yeah, but only after we got a court order. And then, after we got the court order, some of the Republicans, apparently from Mike Braun's office, actually filed a motion to rescind that order. But the next thing that happened is that there are still polls open in Porter County because they have not received their absentee ballots. And the absentee ballots are being driven around the county by I don't know whom, and there are polls that have been closed for 2.5 hours, and they're not reporting yet because they don't have the absentees.
So explain what this means. What does this mean?
Well, it means that, first of all, it's going to be a really long night in Porter County because basically the polls haven't even closed yet. And we need the clerk to be accountable for several thousand ballots that were absentees.
For our viewers here in Central Indiana, can you talk about the races that are happening up in Porter County?
Well, we have a few non-contested races. Mine is contested, and of course we have county contested races, and then Joe Donnelly. But what I'm trying to say is we don't have any results back because our polls haven't officially closed yet.
Has your team communicated with the clerk's office about the problems?
I have been working on this all day, since 6:15 this morning.
So your race is one where the results are going to be highly delayed, potentially?
Yes.
But it doesn't seem to have had, do you think it's going to have an impact on the senatorial race? We've had some outlets calling it. Obviously, there hasn't been a call here. No one's conceded or anything, but...
Well, I find it really amazing that they're already calling the Senate race when Lake County's not reported, Porter County's not closed, LaPorte County has not closed, Monroe County had to go late. They're not reporting either. So the biggest Democrat, strongholds in the state are not even in.
What have you thought about the night overall? Can you talk about? I mean, obviously you said you've had a tough day dealing with the problems up in Porter County, but what do you think about this crowd here?
Well,
we're actually going to take this live. This is Congressman Andre Carson, who's about to address the crowd. He won re-election tonight. We'll get back to this interview in a second.
Hey, man. Hoosiers, thank you so much. What a tremendous honor it is to get reelected. I don't take anything for granted. Every time we run, we put ourselves behind 15 points because, I truly believe that it is an honor to serve. It's a huge responsibility. I want to thank my daughter, Salima. You better be in bed. All right. I want to thank our county chair, Kate Sweeney Bell. I want to thank our state party chair. We know him as Jay-Z, John Zodi. Got to thank Team Carson in the house. Look at that. This is what Indiana looks like. Team Carson's in the audience too, my goodness. Kevin and Casey, wow. Have to thank all of the volunteers who took their time out to help not only with our race, with Joe's race, all of the statewide, all of the county races, all of the township races. Give it up for the volunteers. the precinct committee people. You know, this effort, this democratic movement isn't about one person. It isn't about a group of people. It's about us coming together with a common goal, a common purpose, and a common mission. Together, over the past few years, we've helped our kids graduate high school, make it into college. We've made health care more affordable. We've pushed back on our incarceration rates. We've trained workers, we've grown businesses. Together, we've made this city and state stronger. You know, being in public service is a huge task. It's not about calling yourself counselor or congressman or representative or senator or governor or mayor. It's about making sure that those who have entrusted you to care for their issues, that they feel safe, they feel secure, and they know they have an advocate in you. Which is why I want to give a shout out to Joe Donnelly. I have had the tremendous pleasure of working alongside Joe since I got to Congress. He's fought for Hoosier families. He's fought hard for working families. He's fought for law enforcement. Joe is a truth teller. He's bold. He has a phenomenal wife, and he has great kids. He is a true public servant. He worked himself to the core. You will never outwork Joe Donnelly. We love Joe. They threw everything, including the kitchen sink, at Joe Donnelly, and he did not move. He's a leader. He's a friend. You'll see him again. You'll see him again. Listen, I got some Irish blood in me, let me tell you. A scrappy bunch they are, Casey Kendrick. But I want to tell you this, Democrats, don't give up. We have more fights to win. We have to get prepared for 2020 because we've got a one-term president. Don't you think any differently? I don't want you to get swayed to the left because of the numbers that you're seeing. I want you to be encouraged. I want you to feel empowered. I want us to go forth and know that the people are with the Democratic Party. There were many people who tried to use racism, who tried to use bigotry, who tried to use homophobia, Islamophobia, anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-black sentiment, hatred toward women, but it didn't work. You showed up in huge numbers. We've picked up seats. We're picking up seats. So don't be moved. Don't get fatigued. Be encouraged. The army is here. We are here. I am so honored to serve you. I'm not Andre Carson, I'm just Dre. My grandmother really instilled in me. You know, at one time I thought she hated me. She made me pay rent since I was 14. I was working. She made me work the polls until the polls closed. But she impressed upon me that being a public servant is not about the spotlight. It's not about who you think you are. It's about putting yourself out there and making sacrifices for the common man and woman. That's what the Democratic Party is about. That's what our movement is about. That's what you're about. Are you ready for 2020? Thank you. I love you. God bless. We love you, Joe Donnelly. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Andre Carson, who just won re-election. He has been in Congress since 2008, saying it is an honor to win every single election. He does not take it for granted. And then talking about Senator Joe Donnelly, calling him a friend. But I'm going to bring back who we were just talking to before, State Senator Karen Tallien, and it almost felt like not quite a concession, but an acknowledgement that maybe he's not going to win this race.
It sure sounded like that. I still think it's too early to call that. We still have big, huge Democrat sections of the state that have not reported. And I hated to see Andre, maybe he was just trying to prep the crowd, but I hated to see him suggest that maybe Joe is out.
And then it felt almost like a campaign rally for 2020 when he's just won re-election.
Right. Well, that may be a conciliatory statement to the people here who, if they really think that Joe Donnelly has lost, that, it's like we will live to fight another day, because that's what he said.
All right. State Senator Karen Tallien, we will be sure to follow your race, what's been happening in Porter County, and we appreciate you taking the time with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to send it back to you guys.
All right, Eric, thank you so much. And once again, you heard from Andre Carson there from the 7th Congressional District, praising the Democratic Party, praising the volunteers for his re-election.
Not everyone ready to concede at this point, but we want to cut into a CW right now for an election update. So just hang with us here on wishtv.com for 30 seconds.
Live from Wish TV, this is News 8, your local election headquarters.
And want to get you updated on the U.S. Senate race here in Indiana. All eyes on that across the nation. And right now, 3 separate media outlets calling it for Mike Braun.
A big development that we are following closely. Not everyone ready to concede as far as those at the watch party. However, our news gathering partners at WIBC saying Joe Donnelly has privately conceded to Mike Braun. More on wishtv.com. All right, thanks for staying with us. So we are following a big development here in the U.S. Senate race. 3 networks now calling it for Mike Braun. Our David Williams is live at the GOP watch party at the JW Marriott, where I would say people were cautiously optimistic, hopeful. More and more networks now calling this, David. Are you seeing some celebration?
We actually are, Brooke. Just a couple seconds ago, we heard a lot of cheers from people in this room. We've now had Fox News call the race for Mike Braun. Previously, we had ABC News call. As you reported, a 3rd network has apparently called it for Mike Braun. So we're hearing the applause. You may hear it now as some applause. This is the race as Fox News is reporting the Florida governor's race. But joining me now are 3 Republican women from closest to me, farther away. We have Sherry Spinner from Huntingburg. Thank you for being with us. And we have Dina Lewis from Jasper. And we also have Karina Dugan, also from Jasper. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. So we have been watching this together. We have now seen Fox News and ABC News call the race for Mike Braun ahead of Joe Donnelly. In your heart of hearts, how are you?
Okay. With health care and with so many good things, and the people of our state are so wonderful. I called Mike Braun to let him know I will do everything I can to make sure there's a smooth transition, because that's what the people of Indiana deserve. And I am so blessed to have my family here with me who put up with all of this for all these years. So thank you. Thanks. Look, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I have the most amazing friends. I had the best staff. I had the best campaign manager in Peter Hanscom that a person could ever have. I had the best team in Washington with Joel Elliott as chief of staff that anybody could ever have. And so I end this in a way that I've been filled up so much more by you, that you've given me so much. And I'm so grateful to all of you. And please know this, if there's ever anything I can ever do for you, count on me because of this. We love this country so much. We need to make sure we work to bring our country together rather than to divide it, to make sure every American has a chance. And Martin Luther King's saying that we all came here in different ships, but we're all in the same boat together. We're all Americans. We all have each other's back.
And there you hear it, Joe Donnelly, incumbent U.S. Senator, Democrat Joe Donnelly, conceding to Mike Braun, saying that we're all Americans, we're in this together.
Yeah, he said he conceded because we need a smooth transition here, need to work together, and thanked his staff, his family, his friends, everybody that worked so hard. Certainly a very draining campaign. We could even see it on his face in that last debate. Yeah. I want to bring in Amanda Friesen, IUPUI, poli-sci professor, and we actually made that observation. We were out there and watching that last debate that you could just see almost the stress of this whole entire campaign and this fight that's been going on.
It's been a long one.
Yeah, running for politics is not for the weary of heart, right? I often get asked, when people find out what I do, oh, are you going to, run for office someday? No, this is not a thing I will ever do. It is exhausting, and you're always on. And for someone like Joe Donnelly trying to, be a Democrat and fulfill, that platform and those policy preferences, and people elected a Democrat to enact those kinds of things, but then also recognizing he's from a very Republican state, and so he has to tread that, and that has to be pretty exhausting.
I want to put up those numbers there of this U.S. Senate race and just see where we're at. This has been called officially, but I believe that we're at 53% of precincts reporting. Do we have that graphic of the Senate candidates? We have Lucy Brenton also running, Joe Donnelly, Mike Braun. There we go. 54% called for Mike Braun at this point, but enough for the networks to call it for him. Joe Donnelly, a very gracious concession speech in front of his fellow Democrats at the watch party there.
Very quick, too.
Very quick, and probably not something we expected so soon. Is this early for you? I know we were talking about having a late night, and it seems like things are happening quickly now.
Yeah, certainly with the delays in Porter County and in Monroe County and some of the absentee ballots, at least sources close to the Donnelly camp have said, oh, we think it's going to be a late night, it might come down to the wire. But for him to concede, they probably have information. They know where their voters are, and so decided it's no reason to wait.
And it's a lot bigger of a margin, at least it seems right now, and we'll see what the final numbers are, than what was previously kind of predicted with this entire thing, which you were talking like 1 or 2%, where these undecided voters could come in and push either Donnelly or Braun over the top.
Yeah, and one question that I have for you, the president's influence. He was here 3 times in the past couple weeks campaigning for Braun. I know it's hard to say, but did that have a huge influence to kind of put Braun over the top? I mean, that seemed to be like an awful lot of visits for the president to make in especially the Hoosier state.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things you can do is post-election when all of the numbers are in, and we can look by precinct, we can look by county, et cetera, and see, okay, in those areas where the president went and held rallies and so on, or in the media markets that covered it, was there higher turnout or not? That's the best we can kind of do. We can ask people, if you wanted to follow up and see if that had an influence. Most of the time, it's not the undecided voters, it's who's showing up, right? It's who's deciding. And so maybe enough Democrats thought that Joe Donnelly was safe, or, because he moved so far to the center, maybe people were not excited about his campaign and said, what's the difference? Why, should we turn out for him or not? And because it was the only big race on the ballot, right? There wasn't the governor or, the president and so on. A lot of people maybe just didn't turn out.
All right.
Yeah. Do we have Eric available by chance? I was going to say Eric Feldman, was out in Donnelly's camp out there, at least the Democratic National Headquarters. No Eric, okay. How about David? We have David. All right, David Williams is out at the probably a very jubilant crowd right now at the Republican headquarters in Indianapolis at the JW Marriott. Hey, David, how's it looking out there?
Hey, Mike, in the last couple of minutes, the attitudes have shifted from cautious optimism to outright, as you said, jubilation and happiness. I was looking around the room a second ago. There are smiles, there are cheers, and you see these women here, they are Mike Braun supporters. So to your right, we have Sherry Spinner from Huntingburg. We've got Miss Dina Lewis from Jasper and Miss Karina Dugan from Jasper as well. Ladies, we just heard two different networks, including our own, call Mike Braun as the winner over Joe Donnelly. In your heart of hearts, how are you all feeling? I'll start with you.
Well, this is a great day for Mike Braun and for Indiana, and I think that Mike's going to he's a great man. He's from Du Bois County. We've been a supporter of Mike Braun for so long, and we just are really, really pleased to have him in the Senate to represent Indiana. And I think he'll do a great job for us.
Dina, how are you feeling? You've been watching the results come in.
I am so happy for the Braun family. We've known them for a long time. The family is just a fantastic, down-to-earth family. Mike and his wife have campaigned tirelessly to this. They've knocked on doors. They've been in campaigns. They have really reached the heart of the people. I'm very happy.
And Karina, you were telling me you just texted Mike Braun a couple minutes ago. How are you feeling?
Yes, we just texted him a picture of all of us, and we're so excited to see him. We're waiting for them anxiously to get down here. He's such a good man, and it's such a good family, and we're just so happy for them.
Could you talk about when that shift that happened a few minutes ago from cautious optimism to outright jubilation? When did that shift happen, and why do you think?
Well, it happened so fast, maybe like 10 minutes ago when it was such a close race. But right there at the end, about 10 minutes ago, we saw it so close, and he won. So we're so relieved.
In my mind, there was never a doubt that he would not win. Never a doubt.
And we're waiting for Mike Braun to take the stage. What are you hoping he will say tonight?
Well, I think Mike's going to be really enthusiastic and very pleased and honored to take this position for the U.S. Senate. And I think that Indiana should be very proud to have a man like Mike Braun in the Senate seat.
What do you think this says about the fact that the whole country is watching our U.S. Senate race? We had the results that came in faster than we expected, quite honestly. What do you say about that? How tight the race was that the nation was watching us?
Well, I think that Indiana, we haven't had a Republican U.S. Senator for quite some time now, and Mike Braun, put himself on the line to represent the people of Indiana, and I think that he's going to do a fantastic job in doing that. He's honest, he's a reputable man, he's a great businessman in our community, and we all feel that Mike is going to do a great job for us in the U.S. Senate.
I agree. I think Mike showing against an incumbent is just fantastic. It shows that Indiana is ready to get back down to the grassroots and just really ignite our Midwestern states and do a great job in Washington.
Yes, and I agree. I think we all know him personally, and so we know the real Mike, and we know what a great person he is, and he so deserves this.
Sherry Spinner, Dina Lewis, and Karina Dugan, thank you all so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And there you heard it a few minutes ago. The mood in the room changed from the cautious optimism to outright jubilation, optimism, and happiness. You can see the smiles on their faces. This shows you how people in this room are feeling right now as we take a look around. You can see people are smiling. They are happy. They are giddy that this race has at least been called, because for so long this evening, it was neck and neck. The results were coming in. Mike Braun would be in the lead, then Donnelly. It went back and forth, and now this race has been called. You get a sense of relief in the room, almost like people can just breathe in and exhale now that the results have come in, and they can start to get a little happier. We're just waiting for Mike Braun to step onto the stage. We keep hearing, expecting him perhaps any moment to take the stage and give his victory speech. We're still waiting for him. I had heard a rumor that he was coming. We're still looking for him. But we are waiting for Mike Braun to take this stage any minute. And when he does, we will, of course, bring it to you. So we will stay here and bring it to you as soon as we can. We are live in downtown Indianapolis. I'm David Williams, Wish TV News 8.
All right, David, we will cut right back in as soon as Mike Braun takes the stage there. First, let's start going through some of the results for U.S. House races, starting with District 1.
Here in District 1, the winner declared a Democrat. It was Peter Visclosky, and he Visclosky. There we go. I got to say that correct. Been here for a little while.
District 2, Jackie Walorski with 57% of the vote over Mel Hall.
And District 3, that's been declared for Jim Banks, a Republican, 67% to Courtney Tritch at 33%.
District 4 in the U.S. House, Jim Baird with 65% of the vote over Toby Beck.
And for the first time, we can declare the 5th district to the incumbent, Susan Brooks, who wins 58% to 42%.
All right, moving on to District 6, we have Greg Pence, Mike Pence's older brother, with 62% of the vote. He will take on the seat that his brother left to become governor.
Yeah, in his 7th congressional district, you can see here, we just heard from him a little while ago there at the Democratic Watch Party. Andre Carson takes that, if we have that up.
District 7.
I think we're sticking a little bit here. All right. There, I told you, 61% to 39%.
All right, let's move on. District 8, Larry Bouchon, Republican there with 68% of the vote over William Tannous.
And last but not least, but District 9, and that's been declared for Trey Hollingsworth at 59% to Liz Watson's 41%.
So no real major upsets, and for the most part, U.S. House seats have stayed the same. Incumbents have held on to their seats, and the big headline in the state of Indiana, and the headline that most of the nation was watching, was the Senate race, and the incumbent has been defeated. Mike Braun has defeated Joe Donnelly. Joe Donnelly spoke earlier, just moments ago, at the Democratic Watch Party at the Hyatt Regency downtown. A very gracious concession speech saying he will transition power to the Braun campaign and do everything he can to make that smooth. He called himself the luckiest guy in the world and told everyone at the watch party, if there's anything I can do for you, count on me. I'm here for you. So 6 years in the U.S. Senate, but tonight, that ends.
Yeah, gracious in defeat, that's for sure, but a very quick speech, and called Mike Braun himself to congratulate him on winning this. So we're just waiting for Mike Braun now to come out and give his victory speech here, and once we have that, we will certainly take it for you live. We do have some other races we are following, so want to get some more of those to get you caught up on what's going on out there and how people voted. This is for the sheriff in Hamilton County. Dennis Quackenbush wins that one, 61% to 36%.
All right, another election. There we go, the Noblesville Schools referendum. This was a property tax hike for security measures and also teacher pay. 58% voted yes to approve those tax hikes there.
And IPS voted here pretty overwhelmingly in favor of this, a property tax hike to fund teachers and student services.
There were 2 referendums there for IPS, and both were approved by a large margin. This one for safety and modernization, 75% of voters agreed to that.
And Secretary of State, not a real big surprise here, Connie Lawson takes that with 59% of the vote.
All right, I think the next is state auditor, if that is right. Yeah, Tara Klutz with 58% of the vote over Jocelyn Whitaker with 38%.
And treasurer, we have that as well. That goes to Kelly Mitchell, the Republican, at 62% of the vote.
And moving on, we have a public question on the ballot. This is regarding balanced budgets in the state constitution. 72% voted to approve that change.
All right, got anything else here? Okay, we're still waiting on Mike Braun. Here's a fight that we thought would last well into the evening as they counted all the votes to see who would pull this out, but every major network then saying that Mike Braun had beat Joe Donnelly, and of course now Joe Donnelly comes out and concedes the race to Mike Braun.
Amanda Friesen is an associate professor of political science at IUPUI. She's been with us all night, just giving her insight and opinions regarding today. So what is your takeaway so far of today? We've had polling issues. We've had long lines at voting centers. And then really quite quickly. We've had some results come in. We weren't expecting these maybe till late tonight, and here we are at 9:45, and we have the Senate race conceded.
Democracy is sometimes predictable and unexpected, I guess is what you could say. So, certainly with having, as we kind of mentioned earlier, one major race to look at and it being a midterm, these things do tend to go more quickly. For the average American who's watching, they might be paying attention to their own states. They might have an interest elsewhere, but it isn't like a presidential year where you have more people tuning in to see, okay, how are the states coming in? So it's definitely a very different atmosphere in the midterm.
What do you expect to hear from Mike Braun in his victory speech?
I don't have any expectations. I assume, he will talk about carrying the interests and preferences of Hoosiers to Washington and working with the other congressional delegates from our state to enact things as he sees fit for the state. And, it'll be interesting to see whether or not he mentions the president or the vice president. There are certain candidates that have decided to use that and those that have not. I would think that because President Trump was here, stumping on his behalf, and there was definitely those connections that he will mention. Supporting the president's agenda going forward.
Especially just to be here 3 times. I mean, even so, it feels like it's Friday right now. But he was here yesterday in Fort Wayne with the packed house, promoting and trying to get him elected to the Senate.
Right. Obviously, we talked about U.S. House seats. No surprises there. Incumbents held on to their seats. We've been focusing so much on Indiana races. Have you had a chance to kind of get the national scope of things and how power is shifting around the country, or?
It seems like most of the results I've seen, people, as you may imagine, feel comfortable calling the districts and the states that they were pretty sure were going to go one direction or another.
Bernie Sanders, he's reelected.
Of course, of course, yeah. So people are still looking closely at, some of the House districts that they wondered if Democrats would pick up a few more seats. The high-profile governor's races are still not quite called. So Florida and Georgia,
the Texas Senate race.
Yes.
Yeah. There are some.
So for the political junkies out there who love following all of this, there's a lot more results for them to wait on. But for Hoosiers interested in Hoosier politics.
Yeah, it's been called.
Yeah,
it's been called.
It is interesting. Do you feel like, I don't know if there's been a lot of research on this, but it's just the politics and just the interest in all these races are like a fever pitch. At least it feels that way here from the media side. Is that something you get a sense of?
So I think the key phrase there is here in the media, you feel it. So we still have to remember that, voter turnout is probably, not going to exceed 50%, right? Across the country. Typically in midterms, it hovers around 40%, right? That means 60% of eligible voters aren't even doing the baseline thing, which is voting. Right? So there's this assumption for those of us who work in politics, teach politics, talk, in our social networks, the people we talk to, we feel like it's just business, right, et cetera. But for a lot of Americans, they just aren't paying attention, or they've been disillusioned by the process or frustrated by the controversy, by the conflict, by the seemingly inability for things to get done, or there might be someone who thinks the members of Congress, for example, don't listen to people like me, or they don't have my interests in mind, and so they disengage.
We have seen a surge in voting this midterm compared to others. Does that give you some type of hope? I mean, it's obviously a step in the right direction. We can call it at least that.
Yeah, I think the more we talked a little earlier about the number of people who have been turning out to go out to the Women's March or to be involved in other, political canvassing. Again, Beto O'Rourke's campaign in Texas is really interesting. He has, this army of, hundreds and hundreds of people who are working on his behalf that, maybe wouldn't have been as easily for a challenger to an incumbent to get. But we might be seeing a political moment where more people are getting involved.
Amanda Friesen with IUPUI, thanks so much for your insight.
Live from WISH TV, this is News 8, your local election headquarters.
Good evening, everyone. Brooke Martin along with Mike Barr is here.
Hello, Indiana.
As we bring you the results of this midterm election. The big headline of tonight, Mike Braun defeats incumbent Joe Donnelly for U.S. Senate.
You're taking a live picture right now. Of course, you see the governor behind you. And we're waiting for Mike Braun to get to the podium to give his victory speech as he defeats Joe Donnelly in this key Senate race. A lot of people talking about the fact and the shift in power. Let's take a listen in.
Hoosiers, elect Mike Braun. And I want to thank some special folks right off the bat. These are the folks who 2 years ago or so committed to this journey with the Mike Braun campaign, the Indiana Republican Party, the Republican National Committee, folks like Josh Kelly, Mike Gentry, Ben Mitchell, Pete Seat, Matt Huckleby, Mindy Colbert, Alex Johnson, Steve Ostro, Mike Joyce, Emily Daniels, and hundreds others. Let me tell you a few things that we'll get to him. Let me tell you a few things that we got done in this campaign. We had over 65 paid staff on the ground. We had thousands of volunteers that we trained. We had a 29-stop bus tour that included folks like Governor Holcomb, Lieutenant Governor Crouch, Senator Young, Rudy Giuliani. And we made over 2.5 million voter contacts. And maybe you saw them, but we also had 4 amazing rallies with Vice President Mike Pence and President Donald Trump. We named our statewide tour the Right Track Results Tour because we think Hoosiers like that Indiana's on the right track and the Republican leadership has been delivering results consistently over the last 14 years. And as Hoosier Republicans, we appreciate the trust that they continue to place in us by electing us year after year to office. They elected in 2016 Governor Holcomb and Lieutenant Governor Crouch and Senator Young. They've blessed us by electing us to supermajorities in the House and Senate here at the state level. Tonight, Hoosiers are re-electing all 7 of our congressional members. And they have re-elected our statewide all-star trio of Connie Lawson, Tara Klutz, and Kelly Mitchell. But when we set those goals 2 years ago, we always had to say there had to be that one big audacious goal, and that was to get the one spot that we did not hold from a statewide level. And we've worked every day for the last 2 years to accomplish that, and I am proud to announce and ask to come to the stage our new Senator-elect, Mike Braun.
What a journey this has been. Do you remember, dear, when I said that I was going to run for Senate? And do you remember when I said everybody said, do you need to have your head examined? She did too. Tell you what, so many people to thank, but it starts right here. My dear wife. And we made a big decision many, many years ago to come back to our hometown. And that wasn't typical back in 1978. And we did it for one reason. We wanted to raise a family, wanted to have a chance at starting our own businesses. Very simple plan, and by golly, it worked out. The kids are here on the stage with me, 2 of my grandkids. Truly, dear, we've lived the American dream. Really have. I see so many of you out there. I see Terry, the other Terry, Seitz from Mayor. Yeah, these guys, lots of Terrys. I've made so many friends, and in these 15 months that I've been out doing this, imagine every time I've been on the road, I haven't stayed in a motel or hotel more than 4 or 5 times. People have put me up, made friends with Hoosiers, the way a campaign like this should be. And I want to thank all Hoosiers for giving me a resounding victory, putting your faith in me, and I will not let you down. I promise that. Senator Donnelly called me about 15 minutes ago. Yeah? And just like any competition, you fight hard, you want to win, you got to make your case. And we did it. The one thing I would love to see change in politics is it's gotten way too nasty on both sides. Yeah. It should be about ideas. It should be about what you bring to the table. And both sides and their families have had to carry that burden and the weight. Hope that changes down the road. And then you look at other things. When I decided to do this, I wouldn't have done it, and I mention it almost everywhere I go, if it had been President Hillary Clinton. I'd be hunkered down in southern Indiana trying to survive. And, you know, and I make that point because we as conservatives, being led by President Trump, we've got to prove why our way of thinking, why what works in the state of Indiana is going to work for the rest of America. And I really believe I can weigh in on that argument. Because when we moved back to our hometown, we did raise that family. 3 of my 4 kids work in my business. And the theme of my campaign is that we need to take to Washington what works in the real world, what works in Jasper, Indiana, what works in Warsaw, Indiana, what works in this great state where we lead by our performance, just like we did in tackling infrastructure. We're a state that works, and I thank my lucky stars that I was born in this state and in my hometown, and that it's worked out. I really do. And we have a narrow window. We've got 2 years to show that as conservatives, we can make things work. We need to get our president reelected. Yeah. And what we're going to do is we're going to get more people from the real world that have had to do things that can fix things in a dysfunctional system. You're going to find that other people across this country are going to stick their neck out and take a risk and try to fix things in Washington so the system works for everyone. That's my goal. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine when we made the decision to move back, after serving on a school board for 10 years, after being in our state house for 3 years, passing an amazing infrastructure bill, I wasn't going to run for a third term. I was going to come back to Jasper and do what the founders intended, serve, get back to where you came from. I viewed it as a unique opportunity, and I'll share some special moments with President Trump. I've been with him 4 times, and I've been on the limo 4 times with him. Yeah. And Trump unplugged for 20 minutes on 4 rides. You're going to learn a lot of stuff. And I'll never forget, and Todd Young was with me, the second subject that came up, you remember when he said, do you think we ought to bring Bobby Knight into your campaign? Promises made, promises kept. I told Maureen, how can it can only happen in America and in Indiana when you're with the president, the vice president, and Bobby Knight all on the same night on the same stage. This journey's been 15 months, and it's been get up early. It was 6 days a week, 14 to 18 hours each day. When I started this, not many people believed in it. Many thought it was a fool's errand. All I can tell you is everything I've gone through, I do it again because we got a rare opportunity, I think, to really make things happen in D.C., and I can't wait to be a part of it. My campaign team, my family, everybody that was with me from the beginning, thank you so much. And all I can tell you, I'm not going to let you down. I'm going to go there to represent Hoosiers and hopefully make you proud of me as your next senator from Indiana. Thank you so much.
Want to get your camera behind you?
There you're listening to Mike Braun and his acceptance speech as the winner of the U.S. Senate race here in Indiana. He defeated incumbent Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly tonight.
Yeah, took the concession speech, or took the phone call from Donnelly, who congratulated Mike Braun on winning this race. Called pretty early tonight, to a lot of folks' surprise. A lot of polls early on thought this would be a lot closer race. It appears that, well, Braun now is going to take the Senate seat, and the Republicans will add an extra seat in the Senate.
Much more coming up on News 8 at 10. It starts right now.